Edinburgh in 1707 was one of the most crowded cities in Europe. Over 50,000 people crammed into a space smaller than most modern neighbourhoods. The buildings climbed 14 stories high because there was nowhere else to go. And the smell? People said you could detect Edinburgh from 15 miles away on a windy day. Here's what it was actually like to survive in the city they called Old Reekie. Now look, if you're lying there comfortable and warm, maybe settling in for the night, and you happen to enjoy stories like this one, why not leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there? I genuinely love reading those, and if you haven't already, a subscription would mean a lot. It helps more than you know. Right. So let's talk about your current situation for a second. You're probably in a bed, a proper bed with a mattress, clean sheets, maybe a pillow that actually supports your neck. The room you're in, it smells fine, normal. You can breathe without thinking about it. Now forget all of that. Because you're about to wake up in 1745 Edinburgh, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is going to be fine. Your eyes open. It takes a moment to remember where you are. The ceiling above you is low. The wood is dark with years of smoke and grease and things you'd rather not identify. A thin grey light filters through a window no bigger than your hand, and even that's obscured by rags stuffed into cracks where the glass should be. Your name is Jamie. You're 16 years old, and you're an apprentice to a wig maker on the high street. The first thing that hits you is the cold. Not the crisp cold of a winter morning in the countryside. This is a damp, penetrating cold that's worked its way into your bones while you slept. The blanket covering you, if you can call it that, is a rough piece of wool that smells strongly of whoever slept under it before you, and before them, and before them. You're sharing this room with 3 other apprentices. All of you sleep on pallets stuffed with straw that hasn't been changed in months. The straw crunches when you move, and you've learned to check for vermin before settling in each night. Not that it helps much. The second thing you notice is the smell. Now, I need you to understand something. Your nose has somewhat adjusted to this over the years you've been here, but that doesn't mean you don't notice it. You absolutely do. It's just that you've learned to breathe through it. The smell is a layering of many things. The top note, if we're being generous, is smoke. Coal smoke and wood smoke from thousands of fires burning in thousands of rooms in tenements stacked so close together that you could reach out your window and shake hands with your neighbour across the close. Under that is the smell of unwashed bodies, yours included. You haven't had what you'd call a proper bath in 3 months. Nobody has. Bathing is considered dangerous by most people. Opens up the pores to bad air. Invites disease. Better to stay dirty and healthy. That's the common wisdom. And beneath the smoke and the bodies is something else. Something darker. The waste. You see, there's no plumbing in 1745 Edinburgh, no toilets, no running water. What you've got is a chamber pot under your pallet shared between 4 apprentices. That gets emptied once a day, if you're lucky. And when it gets emptied, well, that's an experience. The traditional method involves a window and a warning. The words are gardyloo, a corruption of the French phrase meaning watch out for the water, though water is really not what's coming down. At roughly 10 at night and 7 in the morning, windows all across the old town fly open, and the contents of chamber pots arc down into the closes and the streets below. Anyone unlucky enough to be walking beneath might shout, "Hold your hand," in hopes of stopping the deluge. Sometimes it works. The city council has been talking about passing laws to regulate this for years. time limits on when you can throw, fines for hitting someone, but so far, it's just talk. The filth keeps falling. But you're not thinking about that yet. You're thinking about getting up without waking the other apprentices. You're thinking about the long day ahead. You're thinking about the fact that your stomach is empty and has been since the thin oatmeal porridge you had yesterday evening. You swing your legs off the pallet. The floor is cold against your feet. Packed earth covered with rushes that should have been changed weeks ago. Your shoes, such as they are, sit at the foot of your bed. You pull them on quickly. The other apprentices are stirring now. Malcolm, the eldest at 19, grunts something unintelligible and pulls his blanket tighter. Duncan, who's about your age, has developed a cough that's been getting worse for the past month. You try not to think about what that might mean. The room you're in is on the 5th floor of a tenement on one of the narrow closes that snake down from the high street. Below you are 4 floors of humanity. Above you are another 9. In this single building, there are probably 200 people. Merchants and lawyers on the middle floors where the stairs aren't too bad and the waste from above doesn't reach. Poor folk like you up high, where the rent is cheaper and the climb is murder. And in the cellars at the bottom, in spaces that never see sunlight, live the people who have even less than you do. This mixing of classes is one of Edinburgh's peculiarities. A lord might live 2 floors above a chimney sweep. A professor at the university might share a staircase with a prostitute. Everyone uses the same close to enter and exit. Everyone breathes the same foul air. You make your way to the door of your room. It opens onto a narrow stone staircase that spirals down through the building. The stairs are worn in the middle from centuries of feet. They're also slick with moisture and other things you don't want to examine too closely in the dim light. As you descend, you pass doors leading to other rooms, other lives. Behind one, a baby is crying. Behind another, a man and woman are arguing in voices so loud that the words echo in the stairwell. Something about money, something about bread, the universal subjects. The smell gets worse as you go down. By the time you reach the close at street level, it's become a physical presence, a thickness in the air. The close itself is barely wide enough for 2 people to pass each other. The walls rise on either side like cliffs. The upper stories jutting out over the street, blocking what little sky there might have been. The cobblestones beneath your feet are covered with a layer of muck that defies description. Horse dung from the few animals that can navigate these narrow passages. Human waste from the nightly ritual. Food scraps. Dead things you step around without looking too closely. And yet, life goes on here. A woman emerges from a doorway carrying a bucket. She nods at you. You nod back. A dog is nosing through a pile of refuse near the entrance to the close. Somewhere above you, a window opens and a voice shouts something. You quicken your pace instinctively. The close opens onto the high street and suddenly the world expands. The high street is the spine of Edinburgh. It runs from the castle at the top of the ridge down to Holyrood Palace at the bottom. On either side, the closes branch off like ribs, leading to hidden worlds of tenements and courts. The street itself is wider than anywhere else in the old town, wide enough for carts to pass, wide enough for the chaos of daily commerce, and chaos is the right word. Even at this early hour, the street is already coming alive. Merchants are opening their booths along the front of buildings. A fishwife with a creel on her back is shouting her wares. Water carriers are making their rounds, heavy buckets balanced on yokes across their shoulders. A sedan chair carried by 2 burly Highlanders pushes through the crowd, the occupant invisible behind curtains. You press yourself against a wall to let them pass. Sedan chairs are the taxis of 18th century Edinburgh. If you're wealthy enough to afford one, you can be carried through the filthy streets without getting your fine clothes dirty. The chairmen are often Gaelic speakers from the Highlands, big men who can handle the steep hills and narrow closes while carrying a passenger in a wooden box. The castle looms above everything. 300 feet up on its volcanic rock, it dominates the skyline. The Union flag flies from its highest tower, a reminder that since 1707, Scotland has been bound to England under a single parliament. That's a sore subject for many in this city. There are those who remember the old Scottish Parliament. There are those who dream of bringing it back. But politics is a luxury you can't afford this morning. Your master's shop is halfway down the high street on the south side. It's a good location, prestigious. Wig makers are important people in 18th century Edinburgh. Every lawyer, every judge, every doctor needs a wig. Every gentleman of fashion needs several. The powdered white periwigs you help create are symbols of status and learning. You duck through the door of the shop and into a space that smells of powder and horsehair and the animal glue used to hold everything together. It's a cleaner smell than outside, almost pleasant. Your master, Mr. Crawford, is already there. He's a compact man in his 50s with quick hands and a quicker temper. His own wig is slightly askew this morning. Never a good sign. Late, he says. You look at the light coming through the window. It's barely dawn. No excuse, he continues. We have 3 orders due today. The Advocate Mackenzie needs his new piece by noon. Lord something or other's man is coming for a repair. And there's that young professor who wants something modern. Modern in this context means slightly less ridiculous. The fashion in wigs has been changing. The enormous structures of 30 years ago are giving way to something more manageable, smaller, less powdered. But there are those who cling to the old styles as if their very identity depends on it. You tie on your work apron and take your position at the preparation bench. Your job, as the youngest apprentice, is the lowest work. Preparing the horsehair, cleaning the forms, mixing the powder. The actual construction of wigs is something you're only beginning to learn after 2 years of this. 2 years. You still have 5 to go before you can call yourself a journeyman. 7 years of apprenticeship is standard. 7 years of unpaid labour in exchange for being taught a trade. Your food and lodging are provided by your master, which is why you sleep in that cramped room above the shop. Why you eat the thin porridge and the occasional bit of bread and cheese that Mistress Crawford allows you. This is the system. This is how skills are passed down. This is how a boy with nothing becomes a man with a trade, if you survive that long. You set to work on a batch of horsehair that needs to be cleaned and combed before it can be used. The hair comes from the tails and manes of horses, bought from knackers who deal in dead and dying animals. Sometimes you find other things mixed in with the hair, bits of flesh, insects. Once, memorably, a small dead mouse. You learn not to let these discoveries disturb you. The morning passes in a rhythm of labour. Other apprentices arrive. Journeymen take their places at the wig-making benches. Mr. Crawford moves between them, inspecting, criticising, occasionally praising. Customers come and go. Around mid-morning you're sent out on an errand. The Advocate Mackenzie's chambers are in a building near the Parliament Close, where the old Scottish Parliament used to meet before the Union. Now it houses the law courts and the advocates who argue before them. The building is grand by Edinburgh standards. Stone columns, wide stairs, a sense of permanence and power. You deliver the wig to a servant who looks down his nose at you even though his own situation is probably not much better than yours. The servant to an advocate thinks himself above the apprentice to a wig maker. These distinctions matter here. They're the rungs of a ladder everyone is climbing. On your way back, you pass through the grass market. The grass market sits in a hollow below the castle rock. It's a wide open space by Old Town standards, used for markets and livestock trading, and, on certain occasions, something else entirely. There's a spot near the east end of the market, a patch of ground that's slightly elevated. That's where the gallows stand when needed. They're not there today. The gallows are stored somewhere between executions, only brought out when the courts have determined that someone needs to die in public. But everyone knows this place. Everyone knows what happens here. And when there is an execution, the grass market fills with thousands of people coming to watch. You've seen it twice in your time here. Once for a murderer, once for a man convicted of sheep stealing. Both times the crowd was enormous. People hung out of windows in the surrounding buildings. Vendors sold pies and ale. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders for a better view. The hangings themselves were awful and fascinating, and you couldn't look away even when you wanted to. The first man died quickly. His neck broke clean. The second man was less fortunate. He dangled and kicked for what felt like forever, while the crowd grew restless, and the hangman's assistants eventually pulled on his legs to finish the job. This is justice in 1745 Edinburgh. This is how the authorities maintain order in a city where order is always one bad harvest, one epidemic, one riot away from collapsing entirely. You hurry through the grass market and climb back up toward the high street. The sun, such as it is, has broken through the perpetual haze of smoke that hangs over the city. For a moment you can see Arthur's Seat in the distance, the ancient volcanic hill that marks the eastern edge of the city, green and wild and untouched by all of this. You think about what's out there, beyond the walls of Edinburgh, the countryside you came from, the farm where you were born, your mother, who might still be alive or might not be. You haven't had word in over a year. Letters cost money, and neither of you has much. You came to Edinburgh because there was nothing for you at home. A third son on a small farm has no inheritance coming, no land to work. Your options were the army, the church, or learning a trade. Your uncle knew someone who knew Mr. Crawford, and the arrangements were made. 7 years of your life in exchange for a future. It seemed like a reasonable trade at the time. Some days, like today, you're less certain. You duck into a close and begin the climb back to the shop. Your legs are strong from years of these stairs. Your lungs have adapted to breathing air that would choke someone from the countryside. You've become, despite yourself, a creature of this city. The close is busy now. Women are at the well at its base, drawing water into buckets they'll carry back up to their rooms. The well is the only source of clean water for the entire tenement. Clean being a relative term. The water comes from somewhere underground, filtered through rock and soil. It's better than drinking from the North Loch, which is basically an open sewer at this point. An old man is sitting on a stone step smoking a clay pipe. He nods at you as you pass. You don't know his name, but you've seen him here every day for 2 years. He's part of the furniture of this place, part of its fabric. Back at the shop, the afternoon stretches ahead. There's more work to do. There's always more work to do. And as you bend over the preparation bench, your hands moving automatically through tasks you've done 1,000 times before, your mind wanders to the question that everyone in Edinburgh is asking. What's going to happen next? Because there are rumours. There have been rumours for months now about a young man across the water, a prince in exile, A Stuart prince who claims that the throne of Britain rightfully belongs to his father, who claims that the German king in London is a usurper. They say this young prince is gathering support. They say he might actually do something about it. They say that soon everything might change. But for now, the powder needs mixing, the horsehair needs combing, and the city outside the window continues its endless, stinking, magnificent dance of survival. You focus on your work, and you wait. Spring comes slowly to Edinburgh. The snow melts. The ice on the North Loch cracks and breaks apart, great sheets of it tilting and sliding and finally dissolving into dark water. The first green appears on Arthur's Seat, that ancient volcanic hill that watches over the city. Birds return, swallows darting between the tenements, sparrows nesting in the eaves. Water flows again through the gutters and closes, carrying away the winter's accumulated filth. The smell changes, not better exactly, different. The smell of thaw, of renewal, of a city shaking off the cold and remembering what warmth feels like. The days grow longer, the sun climbs higher in the sky, and Edinburgh, battered and bruised by everything it's been through, begins to breathe again. It's 1747 now, a new year, a year that doesn't have rebellion in it, a year that might, if you're lucky, be ordinary. You've almost forgotten what ordinary feels like. The past 2 years have been anything but. Occupation and war, hope and despair, friends lost and lovers departed. It's hard to remember the time before all that. Hard to remember what you worried about when there wasn't a war to worry about. But ordinary is coming back. You can feel it in the streets. In the rhythm of commerce resuming, in the way people talk to each other again without always glancing over their shoulders, you're still at your bench, still shaping horsehair, still mixing powder. The work hasn't changed. The shop hasn't changed. But you have. You can feel it in the way you hold your tools, in the steadiness of your hands, in the way Mr. Crawford has started trusting you with more difficult pieces. You're becoming good at this. Not just competent, actually good. It surprises you sometimes. You never wanted to be a wig maker. It was just what happened to you. The path your life took because you were a third son with no inheritance and no other options. But somewhere along the way, between the rebellion and the recovery, you started caring about the craft. There's something peaceful about it. The quiet repetition. The slow transformation of raw materials into something finished and fine. The satisfaction of seeing a completed wig, knowing your hands made it. Mr. Crawford notices. He doesn't say much. He never does. But he gives you better work now. More interesting commissions. And sometimes, when you finish a particularly difficult piece, he nods. Just once. Just slightly. That nod means more than you'd expect. Duncan is healthy again, fully healthy, for the first time in over a year. His cough is gone, his colour is good. He's put on weight, enough that his face doesn't look hollow anymore. He works beside you at the bench, and sometimes he hums as he works. Old songs, familiar songs, the kind you're not supposed to sing anymore. But humming isn't the same as singing, and nobody's going to report him for humming. William finished his Bible again, cover to cover. He's on his third reading now. You asked him once what he was looking for. He thought about it for a long time. Something that makes sense, he said finally. Something that explains why things happen the way they do. Did you find it? He shook his head slowly. But I'm going to keep looking. You understood that. The looking is the point sometimes. The trying to understand. Even if the answers never come. The city is changing. Not in dramatic ways. not in ways that everyone notices. But if you pay attention, you can see it. New faces on the high street. Families who moved away during the Troubles are coming back. New businesses opening in the closes. A printer's shop where a chandler used to be. A coffee house where an old tavern stood. The city is rebuilding itself, one small change at a time. The advocates and merchants who fled during the occupation have mostly returned, and they've brought money with them. Money that flows through shops and taverns and markets. Money that makes things move. You see it in the quality of the wigs Mr. Crawford is asked to make. Finer materials, more elaborate styles. The wealthy are feeling confident again. They're spending again. The garrison is still here. Red coats still patrol the streets. You see them every day, walking their rounds, watching the crowds. But they're less visible now than they were, less aggressive. The rebellion is over. The threat is past. They're just maintaining order now, not suppressing revolt. Some of them even smile occasionally. Some of them have started courting Edinburgh girls, planning futures in a city that isn't at war. The executions have stopped. The gallows in the grass market stand empty. The bodies that hung there have been taken down and buried. People still avoid walking too close to where they stood, but that will fade too. Eventually. Memory is long but not eternal, and people are talking about something new, something called improvement, better roads, better buildings, a new town maybe, on the land north of the Old Town, a town with wide streets and open squares and buildings that don't lean into each other like drunks supporting themselves. You hear men in coffee houses debating it, architects, planners, men who think Edinburgh can be more than what it is, more than this medieval maze of closes and wynds and tenements piled on tenements. Maybe they're right. Maybe someday there'll be a different Edinburgh, a cleaner one, a brighter one. A city that doesn't smell of smoke and waste and too many people crammed into too little space. But that's a future you can barely imagine. For now, this is still home. These closes, these stones, this view of the castle from your window, that great fortress watching over everything. The letter comes in April. A caddie delivers it to the shop on a Tuesday afternoon. A different caddie than before. Younger, maybe 16. He has the look of someone who's new to the job, still learning the routes, still memorising the faces. He asks for the wig-maker's apprentice named Jamie. You take the letter with hands that tremble slightly. The paper is worn, folded and refolded, water-stained in places as if it travelled through rain. It's been on a long journey to reach you, passed from hand to hand, carried by people you'll never meet, through places you'll never see. You turn it over. No seal, no markings, just your name, written in careful letters. You recognise the handwriting. Agnes. Your heart does something strange, speeds up and slows down at the same time. You've thought about this moment so many times, wondered what you'd feel, wondered if there would ever be a letter at all. And now it's here, in your hands, real. You take the letter to the back room. You don't want to read it in front of anyone. Whatever it says, you want to feel it privately first. You want to have the moment to yourself before you have to share it with the world. You unfold the paper carefully. The ink is faded in places, washed pale by whatever weather it travelled through. Some of the words are hard to make out, but you manage. You read slowly, sounding out each word, making sure you understand. Jamie. I'm writing this from a place I can't name. I'm safe. I'm alive. That's all that matters right now. The past months have been difficult. My mistress's cousin in Stirling wasn't as distant from the cause as we'd hoped. There were questions, there were soldiers. We had to move again, and again. For a while, I wasn't sure we'd survive, but we did. We found a place that's quiet, safe. Nobody asks questions here. Nobody cares about the rebellion or who supported whom. It's just a small town by the sea where people fish and farm and mind their own business. I think about you, more than I should, probably. I think about the landing on the 3rd floor, about the conversations we had, about that last night, about the promise I made. I haven't forgotten, but I don't know when I can come back, or if I can. The world is still too dangerous. My mistress is still afraid, and I have to take care of her. She's old and tired, and she's lost everything she had. I'm all she has left, so I'm writing to tell you the truth. I don't know when I'll see you again. It might be years. It might be never. I can't ask you to wait for me. That wouldn't be fair. You have your own life to live, your own path to walk. But I wanted you to know that I'm alive, and that I haven't forgotten you, and that somewhere, in a little town by the sea, there's a girl who still remembers a wig-maker's apprentice who was kind to her when kindness was rare. Whatever happens, Jamie, whatever your life becomes, I hope you find happiness. I hope you find peace. I hope the world is gentler to you than it was to us. Be well, be safe, be happy. Agnes. You read the letter 3 times, then you fold it carefully and put it in your pocket against your chest. She's alive. That's what matters. She's alive, and she's safe, and she hasn't forgotten. The rest you'll figure out. Somehow, someday. The way people always figure things out. Summer arrives in full force. The long days, the heat that makes the closes feel like ovens, the smell that rises from everywhere and never quite goes away. You're used to it now. It doesn't bother you the way it used to. This is just what Edinburgh is, what it's always been, what it will probably always be. You turn 18 in July. Nobody celebrates. Birthdays aren't celebrated much among apprentices. But Duncan sneaks you a bit of ale from somewhere, and William gives you a scrap of ribbon he found in the street. It's blue, faded, worth nothing. But the gesture matters. You're halfway through your apprenticeship now. 3.5 years done, 3.5 years to go. It feels like forever, and no time at all. Some evenings, when the work is done and the light is fading, you climb to the top of the tenement and look out over the city. From up here, you can see everything. The castle on its volcanic rock, still flying the Union flag. The spires of the churches punctuating the skyline. The dense assembly of stone and slate spreading eastward along the ridge toward Holyrood. The Firth of Forth in the distance, catching the last light of the sun. It's beautiful. In its own strange way, it's beautiful. This city has seen so much. Wars and plagues and rebellions, kings and princes and men who believed they could change the world. Most of them failed. Most of them are forgotten now, but the city remains. The stones endure. The people go on living day after day, doing what people have always done. Surviving. That's the word, isn't it? Surviving. Not heroics, not glory. Just getting through another day, another week, another year. Finding food, finding shelter, finding moments of connection with other people who are doing the same thing. You think about everyone you've known. Malcolm, dead and buried in a northern grave. Agnes, alive somewhere by the sea. Duncan and William, still here, still working beside you. Mr. Crawford, with his silences and his nods, Mistress Crawford, with her thin broth and her careful rationing, all of them, in their own ways, just trying to survive. The sun sinks lower, the shadows lengthen, the first stars appear in the darkening sky. You think about the future, what it might hold, where you might end up, whether Agnes will ever find her way back, whether you'll still be here in this shop, making wigs for men who think they're important. You don't know. Nobody knows. That's not how life works. But standing here, on this rooftop, looking out over a city that's been through so much and is still standing, you feel something that might be hope. Not the desperate hope of the Jacobites, believing against all evidence that they could change the world. Something quieter, something smaller. Just the simple hope that tomorrow might be a little better than today, that the work will continue, that the people you care about will be safe, that someday, somewhere, there might be something like happiness. It's not much, but it's enough. You take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. The air smells of smoke and stone and the distant salt of the sea. The city settles into evening. Candles appear in windows. Voices drift up from the streets below. The eternal sounds of Edinburgh. People talking, laughing, arguing, living. You turn away from the view and head back down the narrow stairs, past the closed doors, past the sounds of families eating their dinners and putting their children to bed, past all the small, ordinary moments that make up a life. Your room is quiet when you get there. Duncan is already asleep, his breathing slow and steady. William is reading by candlelight, his lips moving silently. The empty space where Malcolm used to sleep has been filled now. A new apprentice, a boy from Leith, just 14, still learning the basics. Life goes on. New people fill the spaces left by the ones who are gone. You lie down on your pallet. The straw has been replaced recently. It's almost comfortable. The blanket is thin but warm enough for summer. You think about Agnes's letter, still folded against your chest. I hope you find happiness. I hope you find peace. Maybe someday you will. Maybe someday she'll come back, and you'll stand on that third-floor landing again, and everything will be different. Or maybe she won't. Maybe you'll find happiness in other ways, in the work, in the craft, in the small moments of connection that make life bearable. Either way, you'll be here, still surviving, still enduring, still getting through one day at a time. The candle burns low. William closes his Bible and blows out the flame. The room goes dark. Through the window, you can see the stars. The same stars that have watched over this city for centuries. The same stars that Agnes is probably looking at right now in her little town by the sea. You're connected in that way, by starlight, by memory, by a promise that might still mean something, even after everything. The building settles around you, the old timbers creaking, the stones holding the warmth of the day, the sounds of thousands of people pressed together in this ancient maze, settling into sleep. Your eyes grow heavy, and now, here, in this moment, you're not so different from where you started, lying in the dark, listening to the city breathe, waiting for tomorrow. But something has changed. You've lived through history now. You've seen princes and armies and executions. You've loved and lost and learned what it means to survive when the world is trying to break you, and you're still here. That matters. That means something. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The city sleeps beneath them, and somewhere in the darkness, in a tenement on the high street, a wigmaker's apprentice closes his eyes. Tomorrow will come. It always does. But tonight, there's just this. The quiet, the darkness, the slow, steady rhythm of breathing. The feeling of being exactly where you are, in a body that's tired but alive, in a city that's wounded but healing, in a world that keeps turning no matter what. Let the warmth of your own bed hold you now. Let the softness of your pillow cradle your head. You've travelled far tonight, through centuries, through stone and smoke and starlight, through the lives of people who lived and loved and struggled just like you do. Now it's time to rest. The story is over, but life goes on, and somewhere, in the space between sleeping and waking, the past and the present touch each other gently. Close your eyes, breathe, sleep now. Edinburgh will still be there in the morning, and so will you. The Tronkirk's clock tower strikes 6. You've been at the workbench for nearly 11 hours now, not counting the errand to the advocate's chambers. Your fingers are stiff. Your back aches from bending over the horsehair. The powder you've been mixing has worked its way into every crease of your skin, turning your hands a ghostly white that won't wash off properly for days. Mr. Crawford is satisfied with the day's work. This is as close to praise as you're going to get. He dismisses you and the other apprentices with a wave of his hand and a reminder that tomorrow there's a special order coming in. Some lord from the Highlands wants something elaborate, something expensive, something that will keep everyone busy for a week. You step out onto the high street and the city hits you all over again. The light is different now, golden, slanting. The sun is dropping toward the castle rock, and the shadows of the tenements stretch across the cobblestones like long, dark fingers. The evening crowds are different from the morning ones. Fewer merchants, more workers heading home, more people heading to taverns. Malcolm, the older apprentice, falls into step beside you. He's got a few pennies in his pocket. His sister sent them last month and he's been saving them for a night like this. "Come on," he says. "I'll buy you a drink." This is unusual. Malcolm isn't known for generosity, but you're not about to say no. The tavern he leads you to is down one of the closes off the Canongate. The Canongate runs east from the High Street toward Holyrood Abbey, where the old kings of Scotland used to stay before the Union changed everything. It's a wider road than most in the old town, but the buildings pressing in on either side are still tall enough to block out the sky. Stone faces rising 4, 5, 6 stories, each one packed with families stacked on top of each other. Carts rattle past over the cobbles. A woman carrying a bundle of laundry nearly knocks into you. A man pushing a handcart loaded with coal grunts at you to move aside. This is the rhythm of evening in Edinburgh. Everyone going somewhere, everyone with somewhere to be. The tavern is called the White Hart, though the sign above the door is so faded you can barely make out the shape of a deer. Inside, the room is low-ceilinged and dark. Smoke from a peat fire mingles with pipe smoke from a dozen customers. The floor is packed earth covered with sawdust and rushes. It smells like spilled ale and sweat and something cooking in the back room. Malcolm orders 2 pints of small beer and leads you to a table in the corner. Small beer is what ordinary people drink. It's weak enough that you could have 5 or 6 pints without getting properly drunk, but it's safer than water and more filling than you'd expect. The brewing process kills whatever might be living in the water. Smart people figured that out even if they didn't understand why. The ale comes in wooden cups. It's dark and slightly bitter and surprisingly cold. You drink half of yours in one go. Malcolm watches you with something like amusement. thirsty, he says. You just nod. Around you, the tavern is filling up. Workers from the nearby breweries and tanneries, a few sailors up from Leith, the port town a mile to the north. Some men who look like they might be lawyers or clerks, their wigs slightly askew after a long day. The social mixing continues even here. A tavern is neutral ground. Everyone's money spends the same. The food arrives without being ordered. It's what everyone gets. A bowl of broth with some bits of gristle floating in it, and a heel of bread that's probably 2 days old. Malcolm pays for both of you. This is what working people eat. If you're lucky, you might get a piece of fish on Fridays. If you're really lucky, you might taste actual meat once or twice a month. Butcher's meat, they call it. Beef or mutton from the flesh market close, where the blood runs down the cobblestones and into the drains. The wealthy eat differently, of course. Up in their apartments on the better floors, they're having roast fowl and puddings and wine from France. The merchants and lawyers and doctors who can afford to buy whatever they want. But that world is as distant from yours as the moon. You eat in silence for a few minutes. The broth is thin but warm. The bread is tough but fills the hollow space in your stomach. This is better than what you'd get back at the shop. Mistress Crawford is not known for her generous portions. Malcolm leans back and looks at you. You hear what happened at the castle this morning? You shake your head. They nearly doubled the garrison. More redcoats coming up from the south. This gets your attention. The castle garrison is already substantial. Edinburgh has been a military town since the Jacobite rising back in 15, when supporters of the exiled Stuart king tried to take back the throne. The government won that time. They've been nervous ever since. Why, you ask? Malcolm shrugs, but there's a look in his eye that suggests he knows more than he's saying. People are talking, he says quietly, about the young one, the prince. You glance around the room. Nobody seems to be paying attention to your conversation. But in a city like this, you never really know who's listening. The young prince, Charles Edward Stuart, the son of the man who claims to be the rightful king of Britain. He's somewhere in France right now, people say. Or maybe Italy, growing up in exile, waiting for his chance. There are those in Edinburgh who still toast to the king over the water, who slip Stuart coins into collection boxes for the cause, who remember what Scotland was before the Union, before the English Parliament took over, before the castle became a symbol of occupation rather than sovereignty. And there are others who think all of that is dangerous nonsense, who have prospered under the new order, who see the Stuart cause as a pathway to civil war and ruin. Malcolm is somewhere in between, you think, like most people. My uncle, he says, was out in the 15, fought at Sheriffmuir, lost 3 fingers to a cavalry sabre. You didn't know that about Malcolm's uncle. He doesn't talk about it, Malcolm continues, but sometimes when he's had a few drinks he sings the old songs. You know the ones, you know the ones, everyone knows the ones. Songs about bonny princes and rightful kings and the dream of Scotland restored. You've heard them sung quietly in back rooms. You've heard them hummed by old women who remember different times. Dangerous songs. Nothing's going to happen, you say. It's been 30 years since the last rising. They lost. It's over. Malcolm just looks at you. Then he finishes his beer and signals for 2 more. The evening deepens. More people crowd into the tavern. A fiddler sets up in the corner and starts playing something lively. Conversation gets louder. Someone starts singing along. The mood shifts from tired workers taking the edge off to something more festive. You realise you haven't thought about horsehair or powder or Mr. Crawford for almost an hour. This feels like an achievement. A girl brings over your second round of beer. She's young, maybe your age, with dark hair and a face that is either tired or bored or both. She catches you looking and holds your gaze for just a moment before moving on to the next table. Malcolm notices. "Don't even think about it," he says. "Her father owns this place. He'd kill you. You weren't thinking about it." "Not really. But now you're thinking about it." Outside the window, the light has faded completely. Edinburgh at night is a different city. The same streets that bustle with commerce during the day become something else after dark. Something more dangerous. There are no streetlights, no lamp posts. If you want to see where you're going, you bring your own candle or lantern, or you hire a link boy to carry one for you. Link boys are usually children, earning a few pennies by leading drunken gentlemen through the dark streets to their destinations. It's honest work, mostly. The problem is that darkness hides things. Pickpockets work the crowds outside taverns, waiting for men who've had too much to drink. Footpads lurk in the closes, ready to club a passing stranger and rifle through their pockets. Some of them work in pairs, one to distract you with a question or a sob story, the other to come up behind you with a cudgel. The city guard patrols some areas, but they can't be everywhere, and some of them are as corrupt as the criminals they're supposed to catch. Pay them enough and they'll look the other way while your shop is robbed. Cross them and you might find yourself arrested for something you didn't do. There are worse things than thieves out there too. Men who've lost their minds to drink or disease. Women desperate enough to do anything for the price of a meal. Children who've grown up in the cellars of the Cowgate, never knowing anything but darkness and violence. The city produces these people, crushes them between its stones like grain in a mill, and then acts surprised when they turn dangerous. Women of a certain profession work the darker corners of the Canongate and the Cowgate. This is the oldest business there is. Edinburgh pretends to be shocked by it, even as it supports a thriving trade. The kirk thunders against sin on Sundays. The customers return on Monday nights. You've learned to navigate this world. You know which closes to avoid after dark. You know how to walk quickly and quietly, with your hands in sight and your head down. You know not to make eye contact with strangers. You know not to carry anything worth stealing. But tonight you're not alone. Malcolm is with you. And Malcolm, despite his skinny frame, has a reputation for being handy in a fight. We should go, you say. Mistress Crawford locks the door at 10. Malcolm waves for a third round. Another hour won't hurt, he says. It's not even 8 yet. You stay. The fiddler plays faster now. People are dancing, sort of. It's more like shuffling in place, but the energy is infectious. The girl with the dark hair is weaving between tables carrying drinks, dodging hands that reach for her. She handles it all with practiced ease. You think about your life, the 7 years stretching ahead of you, the cramped room and the thin porridge and the endless work. And you think about what Malcolm said, about soldiers arriving, about the prince across the water. What would you do if he came? The question arrives unbidden and sits there in your mind like a stone in your shoe. What would you do? Would you fight for a king you've never seen, for a cause that lost 30 years ago? Would you risk everything for the dream of Scottish independence? Or would you keep your head down, keep working, keep surviving the way you have been? You don't know. You're 16 years old. You're an apprentice wig maker. You own nothing but the clothes on your back and a knife your father gave you before he died. You are nobody. Nothing. And yet, something is stirring in this city. You can feel it. In the way people talk, in the way they look at the redcoats in the streets, in the way old men sit a little straighter when certain songs are played. Malcolm is watching the room with an expression you can't quite read. "I've been thinking," he says, "about when my time's up. His apprenticeship ends in 2 years. He's been at it longer than you. I might not stay in Edinburgh," he continues, "might head north. My uncle has connections in the Highlands. That's new information. Malcolm has never talked about leaving before." "Why?" you ask. He doesn't answer directly, just takes another drink of his beer. "Things are going to change," he says finally, "one way or another. Better to be somewhere you can see it coming." The fiddler stops playing. The room seems suddenly quieter. Someone opens the door and a blast of cold night air cuts through the warmth of bodies and fire. A man enters, big, red coat, a soldier. The conversation doesn't exactly stop, but it shifts, gets quieter, more careful. Everyone is aware of the uniform in the room. The soldier walks to the bar and orders something. His accent is English, Southern English. He's a long way from home. This is part of what the garrison means. These men don't belong here. They've been sent here to keep order, to prevent rebellion, to remind everyone that Scotland is now part of something larger, something ruled from London. Some people in this tavern probably work with soldiers, supply them, serve them, take their money. Others probably hate them with a quiet, burning hatred that never quite goes out. The soldier gets his drink and finds a seat near the fire. He doesn't seem interested in causing trouble. He's just a man far from home, looking for warmth and alcohol like everyone else. But his presence changes the room. Malcolm stands up. "Time to go," he says. "Now you agree with him." You make your way to the door, past the soldier who doesn't look up, past the bar where the dark-haired girl is wiping down the wood with a rag, past the fiddler who's packing up his instrument. The cannon gate is dark and cold. Your breath makes clouds in the air. The stars are invisible behind the perpetual haze of smoke that hangs over the city. Malcolm walks beside you in silence. The streets are mostly empty now, just a few figures moving between pools of shadow. A link boy passes with his torch, leading a gentleman who's clearly had too much to drink. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks. You climb up through the closes toward the high street. The stairs are treacherous in the dark. You've done this climb 100 times, but each time you're aware of how easy it would be to slip, to fall, to crack your head open on the worn stone and lie there until morning, when someone would find you. The close is alive with sounds even at this hour. Behind closed doors, families are settling in for the night. You hear a mother singing to a child, an old man coughing. Somewhere above you, the rhythmic creak of a bed that means someone is either praying or doing something else entirely. Light enters these spaces in shafts during the day. At night there's nothing. Just the feel of the walls on either side guiding you upward. Just the smell of smoke from 1,000 fires and the ever-present stench of everything else that accumulates in places where too many people live too close together. A cat darts across your path. You nearly trip over it. Malcolm swears quietly. Privacy here is not a right, it's a rare luxury. Everyone knows everyone's business. Everyone hears everyone's arguments, everyone's love-making, everyone's grief. The walls are thick stone, but the doors are thin wood, and the ceilings are just the floorboards of whoever lives above. This is how Edinburgh lives. Stacked and packed and pressed together until you can't tell where one family ends and another begins. Survival in Edinburgh means paying attention. Always. You reach the shop without incident. The door is still unlocked. Mistress Crawford is sitting by the fire knitting something. She looks up when you enter but says nothing. She's used to apprentices coming home smelling of ale. You climb the stairs to your room. Duncan is already asleep, his coughing quieter now. The third apprentice, a boy named William who rarely speaks, is reading a book by candlelight. He must have saved for months to afford that candle. You strip off your outer clothes and climb onto your pallet. The straw crunches beneath you. The blanket smells the same as always. But something feels different tonight. Maybe it's what Malcolm said. Maybe it's the soldier in the tavern. Maybe it's just the ale working on your tired brain. But as you lie there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city settling around you, you feel like you're waiting for something, like the whole city is waiting. Outside your window, Edinburgh breathes and shifts and dreams its old dreams. The castle looms on its ancient crag, high above the valley floor, holding its garrison of redcoats and its store of weapons and its centuries of history. And somewhere far away, across the water, a young prince is making plans. You close your eyes. Sleep comes eventually, and with it, dreams of fire and music and streets you don't recognize running with people you've never seen. Tomorrow is another day of work, but tomorrow is also one day closer to whatever is coming. Sunday arrives like it always does, with bells. The Tronkirk starts it, then St. Giles, then every other church in the city joins in until the whole of Edinburgh is drowning in the sound of bells calling the faithful to worship. You can't ignore them, that's the point. In Scotland, the kirk is everything. The Church of Scotland runs this country in ways the government in London never could. Ministers track who attend services. Elders visit homes to make sure families are praying. Skip church too many times and you'll find yourself hauled before the kirk session, answering questions about your faith while the whole congregation watches. This is how order is kept, not just through soldiers and magistrates, but through the watchful eyes of neighbours who report each other's sins, adultery, drunkenness, working on the Sabbath, speaking ill of the minister. All of it is noted, all of it is punished. You roll off your pallet and immediately notice something wrong. Duncan isn't moving. He's still under his blanket, curled on his side, and his breathing sounds like someone dragging stones across gravel. Hey, you shake his shoulder. Duncan, wake up. He opens his eyes. They're glassy, unfocused. His skin, when you touch his forehead, is burning hot. Can't, he whispers. His voice is a croak. Can't get up. Malcolm is already dressed. He comes over and looks down at Duncan with an expression that's hard to read. It might be concern. It might be something else entirely. He needs to see a doctor, you say? Malcolm laughs. It's not a kind sound. With what money? You don't have an answer for that. Apprentices don't get paid. The food and lodging are supposed to be payment enough. If Duncan needs a doctor, Mr. Crawford would have to pay for it, and Mr. Crawford is not known for his generosity towards sick apprentices. Stay with him, Malcolm says. I'll tell the master. He leaves. You sit on the edge of Duncan's pallet and watch him breathe. Each breath is a struggle. Each exhale rattles in his chest like something's loose in there. You've seen this before, back on the farm before you came to Edinburgh. A neighbour's son got sick like this, started with a cough, turned into something worse. They buried him 3 weeks later. Duncan, you say quietly, can you hear me? His eyes flutter open again. He tries to smile. Told you, he whispers. Told you this city would kill me. He did say that. When he first arrived about a year ago, he kept talking about how he missed the countryside, how the air in Edinburgh was poison, how the close felt like a tomb pressing in on him from all sides. You thought he was being dramatic. Maybe he wasn't. Mr. Crawford appears in the doorway. He's dressed for church in his best coat, his wig freshly powdered. Behind him, Mistress Crawford peers over his shoulder with an expression of distaste. "How bad?" Mr. Crawford asks. "Bad, you say. He needs help." Mr. Crawford sighs. The sound of a man being asked to spend money he doesn't want to spend. "I'll send for the apothecary," he says finally, "after church. You stay here with him. Give him water if he'll take it, and then he's gone. Both of them are. Off to St. Giles to sit in their pew and pray for their souls and pretend they're good Christian people. You're left alone with Duncan and the sound of his breathing. The water situation is a problem. There's a pitcher in the corner of the room. It's empty. The well at the bottom of the close is 7 flights of stairs down. You'll have to go get it yourself. You leave Duncan wrapped in his blanket and make your way down the spiralling staircase. The building is quiet now. Everyone is either at church or pretending to be asleep. Sunday is supposed to be a day of rest, but someone still has to fetch water. Someone still has to empty the chamber pots. Someone still has to feed the animals that don't care what day of the week it is. The close at the bottom is empty. Sunlight falls in shafts through the gaps between buildings, illuminating dust motes and things you'd rather not identify floating in the air. The well is a simple stone structure with a wooden bucket on a rope. You lower the bucket, hear the splash when it hits water, wait for it to fill, and then haul it back up. Your arms are strong from years of this work. The bucket is heavy but manageable. You pour the water into your pitcher, careful not to spill any. Water is precious. Every drop you waste is another trip down those stairs. A woman appears from a doorway across the close. She's carrying her own bucket, heading for the same well. Young, maybe a few years older than you. Dark hair pinned up under a cap. A servant's dress, plain but clean. She sees you and nods. You nod back. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Just 2 people in an empty close on a Sunday morning, doing the work that doesn't stop for the Sabbath. "Your friend," she says, "the one who's sick, is he any better?" You're startled that she knows. But of course she knows. Everyone knows everything in a building like this. The walls might be thick, but word travels through them like water through cracks. Worse, you say. She lowers her bucket into the well. "My mistress has some herbs," she says, "for fever. I could bring some up if you want." You hesitate. Charity isn't free in Edinburgh. Everything has a price, even kindness. "Why would you do that?" She shrugs. "Because he's sick. Because it's Sunday. Because my mother died of the fever when I was small and nobody helped her." She says this matter-of-factly. No self-pity, just a statement of how things are. "What's your name?" you ask. "Agnes," she says. "Agnes MacLeod. I work for Mistress Douglas on the 3rd floor. Jamie, you say. Wigmaker's apprentice. 5th floor." She pulls up her bucket and fills her own pitcher. "I'll bring the herbs later," she says, "after my mistress is asleep." Then she's gone, back through the doorway she came from, leaving you standing alone by the well with a full pitcher of water and a strange feeling in your chest. You climb back up the 7 flights of stairs. Your legs burn by the time you reach the top. This is what life is, climbing stairs with heavy loads, over and over, until your body gives out or you find some way to escape. Duncan is asleep when you return, or unconscious. It's hard to tell the difference. You pour some water into a cup and try to get him to drink. Most of it dribbles down his chin, but some goes in. That's something. The bells have stopped ringing. The city is quiet now. Everyone is in church, listening to sermons about hellfire and damnation, about the wages of sin and the promise of salvation. You should be there too. Missing church is noted. The elders keep track of who attends and who doesn't. Persistent absence can mean fines, public shame, questions about your faith that nobody wants to answer. But someone has to stay with Duncan. Surely that's a good excuse. Surely caring for the sick is more Christian than sitting on a hard wooden pew listening to some minister drone on about things you barely understand. You sit by the window and look out at the city. From up here, on the 5th floor, you can see across the rooftops to where the land opens up beyond the walls. The city stretches eastward along the ridge, a dense assembly of stone and slate. Church spires punctuating the skyline. The castle commands the western height, perched on its great rock like a stone fist raised against the sky. And there, beyond the low-lying ground and the still waters of what remains of the North Loch, Arthur's Seat rises, another volcanic remnant from ages before people walked this land, green and wild and untouched by the filth and noise of the city below. The view from here shows you exactly where you are, trapped between the medieval past and something else, something newer, something that might be better or might be worse. The city is changing. New ideas are spreading through the taverns and coffee houses. Men are talking about reason and progress and the future of mankind. But here, in these ancient tenements with their crumbling plaster and smoke-darkened stone, the past still holds on tight. Sometimes you imagine walking out there, climbing to the top of Arthur's Seat, looking down at the city and all its filth and noise and seeing it from the outside for once, being somewhere you can breathe without tasting smoke. But that's a fantasy. You have 5 more years of this. 5 more years of horsehair and powder and Mr. Crawford's criticism. 5 more years of thin porridge and shared pallets, and the endless climb up and down these stairs, if you survive that long, if the fever doesn't get you like it's getting Duncan, if the footpads don't catch you on a dark night, if 1,000 other dangers don't end your story before it really begins. The apothecary arrives in the late afternoon. He's a thin man with spectacles and a bag full of mysterious bottles. He examines Duncan with an air of boredom, as if sick apprentices are the most tedious thing he has to deal with, which they probably are. He takes Duncan's pulse. He looks at his tongue. He asks questions about what he's been eating, where he's been sleeping, whether he's been near any dead bodies or foul smells. The questions seem random to you, but apparently they mean something. Edinburgh has doctors, real doctors who've studied at the university and know Latin and can recite Hippocrates from memory. But those doctors charge prices that would equal a year of Mr. Crawford's rent. For people like you, there are apothecaries. Men who mix medicines according to formulas passed down through generations, who know which herbs treat which symptoms, who sometimes cure their patients and sometimes don't. Fever, he pronounces. Obviously. He prescribes a tincture that smells like something died in it, and instructions to keep the patient warm and give him broth if he'll take it. The medicine contains things you'd rather not think about. Apothecaries use everything. Ground up minerals, animal parts, plants that would kill you in the wrong dose. It's all mixed together according to principles you don't understand, based on theories about humours and balances that go back to the ancient Greeks. Will he live? You ask. The apothecary shrugs. God's will, he says. And then he leaves to collect his fee from Mr. Crawford. You stand there holding the bottle of tincture, feeling useless. That evening Agnes appears at the door. She's carrying a small cloth bundle. Inside are dried herbs that smell sharp and green, completely unlike the apothecary's medicine. My grandmother's recipe, she says. Steep it in hot water. Make him drink as much as he can. You take the bundle. Your fingers brush hers for just a moment. Thank you. She looks past you to where Duncan lies on his pallet. He looks bad, she says. I know. I lost a brother to the fever, she continues. He was about his age. It was 5 years ago. We lived in a room in the Cowgate back then, before I found work here. The Cowgate. You know that street. It runs below the high street, in the valley between the ridges. It's where the poorest of the poor live, in cellars that never see sunlight, in rooms where water runs down the walls and mould grows on everything. You walked through there once, on an errand for Mr. Crawford. The smell was different from the rest of the city. Worse, somehow. More concentrated. The people who looked out from doorways had faces that seemed older than their years. Children with the eyes of old men. Women who might have been beautiful once before poverty ground them down. The buildings there are the same stone tenements as everywhere else, but somehow they feel heavier, more oppressive. The closes are narrower, the light barely reaches the ground, and the sounds are different too. Less commerce, more desperation. Less laughter, more crying. If you fell far enough, if you lost your apprenticeship and had nowhere else to go, that's where you'd end up. In the Cowgate, among the people who have nothing left to lose. I'm sorry, you say. She shakes her head. Don't be sorry. Just don't let him die if you can help it. She turns to go. Agnes, you say. She stops. Come back tomorrow. Let me know if the herbs work. She almost smiles. All right, Jamie. I'll come back tomorrow. Then she's gone, and you're left with the herbs and the sick boy and the long night ahead. You make the tea the way she said, hot water from the kettle. Mistress Crawford reluctantly allowed you to use. The herbs steep and turn the water a brownish-green colour. It smells like the countryside, like fields and forests and places that aren't Edinburgh. Duncan drinks it. Not much, but some. His fever seems to ease a little. His breathing sounds slightly less like a death rattle. Or maybe that's just hope talking. The night passes slowly. You doze in a chair you dragged over from the corner. Every few hours you wake to check on Duncan, to give him more tea or water. Malcolm comes back from somewhere around midnight, smelling of ale and smoke. He looks at Duncan, looks at you, and says nothing. William, the quiet apprentice, reads his book by the last of his candle. When the flame finally gutters and dies, he sighs and curls up on his pallet, and the city sleeps. Somewhere out there, behind the facades of the Royal Mile, in shared spaces where neighbours conduct the business of survival, other dramas are playing out. Other people are sitting up with sick relatives. Other servants are sneaking through doorways with bundles of herbs. Other boys are wondering if they'll live long enough to see the end of their apprenticeship. The buildings are worn, their plaster is crumbling, their stone is darkened by smoke. But life persists. It always does. People trade and argue and gossip and endure. They survive because the alternative is unthinkable. You look at Duncan's sleeping face. He seems peaceful now. The fever has broken at least partially. He's sweating, which is supposed to be a good sign. Maybe he'll make it. Maybe Agnes's grandmother's recipe is better than the apothecary's expensive tincture. Maybe there's still hope in this city of stone and shadow. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, not quite asleep but not quite awake either, floating somewhere in between, where the sounds of Edinburgh fade to a distant murmur and the weight of everything doesn't press quite so heavily. Tomorrow is Monday, tomorrow the work begins again. But for now, in this quiet hour before dawn, you allow yourself to rest. Duncan lives. By Monday morning his fever has broken properly. He's weak as a kitten and can't stand without help. But his eyes are clear again, and his breathing sounds like breathing instead of dying. Agnes's herbs worked better than the apothecary's medicine, or maybe both worked together, or maybe Duncan was just lucky. In Edinburgh, you take what you can get, and don't ask too many questions about where it came from. Mr. Crawford is relieved, not because he cares about Duncan particularly, but because a dead apprentice means explaining things to the guild. It means finding a replacement. It means disruption. You can go back to work, he tells you over breakfast. A thin porridge with a splash of milk and a piece of bread that's only 1 day old. Feast conditions. Duncan stays in bed. William, the quiet one, is assigned to watch him. You and Malcolm are needed in the shop. The Monday crowds on the high street are different from Sunday's emptiness. The city has woken up angry and hungry and ready to do business. Merchants are shouting prices. Carts are blocking the narrow passages between buildings. A fight has broken out somewhere near the Tron, and people are gathering to watch. Mr. Crawford sends you out almost immediately. He needs supplies. Horsehair from a dealer in the Cowgate, powder from an apothecary near the university, and something for dinner if you can manage it. Meat, if possible. The successful completion of the advocate's wig order has put him in a generous mood. You grab a basket and head out into the chaos. The high street is the city's spine. Everything flows through here. Every deal, every argument, every bit of news and gossip. Advocates in wigs walk beside sedan chairs carried by burly Highlanders. Servants haul barrels and sacks toward the closes where their masters live. A soldier in a red coat stands at the corner of a close, watching the crowd with eyes that miss nothing. You push through the press of bodies toward the flesh market. Every few steps someone is trying to sell you something. A woman with a basket of eggs, a boy with ribbons pinned to a board, a toothless old man claiming his tonic will cure anything from gout to impotence. The noise is constant. People shouting prices, haggling, arguing, laughing. This is the sound of commerce, the sound of survival. The flesh market close drops steeply down from the high street toward the Cowgate. It's narrow. Treacherous. The cobblestones are slick with things you try not to think about. Blood runs down the channels in the centre of the street, mixing with the general filth that accumulates in any place where meat is sold. But this is where the butchers work, and if you want meat in Edinburgh, this is where you come. The smell hits you before you see anything. Blood. Fat. The particular sweetness of flesh that's been hanging too long. The butchers work in stalls along both sides of the close, their wares displayed on wooden tables. Carcasses hang from hooks, sheep, pigs, cattle that have been driven down from the highlands and slaughtered here, within sight of the castle. Flies buzz despite the cold. Dogs lurk at the edges waiting for scraps. A cat watches from a windowsill with the patient expression of a creature that knows exactly where its next meal is coming from. The butchers themselves are big men mostly. You'd have to be to swing a cleaver all day and haul sides of beef from hooks. Their aprons are stiff with dried blood. Their hands are red and raw from constant washing in cold water. They call out to passing customers with voices hoarse from shouting. You're not here to buy from the fancy stalls where the whole joints hang. Those are for wealthy households with money to spend. The advocate's wife, the merchant's cook, people who can afford to be choosy about what they eat. You're looking for something cheaper. Offcuts, trimmings, the bits that no respectable household wants, but that make perfectly good stew if you don't look too closely. A butcher near the bottom of the close knows Mistress Crawford. He sets aside the less desirable pieces for customers like you. Today he's got some neck bones with a bit of meat still attached, and some liver that's only slightly grey around the edges. 6pence, he says. You haggle. That's expected. After a few minutes of back and forth, you settle on 4pence, which is what both of you knew it would be from the start. The dance matters, though. It's part of how things work. The meat goes in your basket, wrapped in paper that was probably a pamphlet about something political before it got recycled. Next stop is the cowgate for the horsehair. You take a different route down. The closes that connect the high street to the cowgate are like vertical streets, dropping down the slope of the ridge through darkness and stench. Light enters in shafts where gaps between buildings allow it. Smoke drifts from windows. Laundry hangs on lines strung between walls, dripping onto the heads of people passing below. A dog scavenges in a pile of refuse. It looks up at you with yellow eyes, decides you're not a threat, and goes back to its meal. At the bottom, the cowgate stretches east and west. It's darker down here. The tenements rise on both sides, blocking what little sky there is. The people who live here look different from the people on the high street. Thinner, harder, more desperate. You find the horsehair dealer in a shop that's barely more than a hole in a wall. He's an old man with hands like claws and eyes that have seen too much. He sells you what Mr. Crawford ordered without much conversation. The horsehair goes in your basket on top of the meat. Now for the powder. You climb back up to the high street and head east toward the university. The colleges of Edinburgh are clustered near the cowgate, in buildings that look almost as old as the tenements around them. Students in their dark gowns hurry between classes. Professors walk with books under their arms, discussing things you'll never understand. There's a coffee house near the corner that's always full of men arguing. You can hear them through the open door as you pass. Something about trade policy. Something about the nature of property. Words you recognize individually, but that don't make sense strung together. Coffee houses are new in Edinburgh. They've only been around for maybe 30 years. But they've changed things. Men gather there to read newspapers, to discuss ideas, to argue about everything from politics to philosophy. Coffee keeps them awake and alert. It's not like ale, which dulls the mind. Coffee sharpens it, or so people say. The men in these coffee houses are building something. You can feel it even if you don't understand it. A new way of thinking about the world. They call it the age of reason, the age of progress. They believe that human beings can figure out the answers to any question if they just think hard enough and observe carefully enough. Some of them are professors, some are lawyers, some are doctors or clergymen. They come from different backgrounds, but they share something, a hunger for knowledge, a belief that things can be better. You've heard stories about some of them. A philosopher named Hume who writes about morality and may or may not believe in God. People whisper that he's an atheist, though he's too clever to say so openly. An economist named Smith who's studying how wealth is created and distributed who talks about markets and labour and the invisible forces that shape commerce. A historian named Robertson who's rewriting the story of Scotland with footnotes and sources instead of legends and myths. These are the men who are making Edinburgh famous beyond Scotland, beyond Britain even. They're being read in Paris and Amsterdam and Philadelphia. They're changing how people think about everything. But that world is as far from you as the moon. You buy the powder from an apothecary shop near the old college. It's a white substance made from ground up rice and wheat, used to dust the wigs and keep them looking fresh. Wig powder is taxed by the government, which makes it expensive, which means every grain matters. On your way back, a caddy falls into step beside you. You know about caddies. They're the unofficial guides and porters of Edinburgh. They wear badges on their coats showing their licence by the city council, and they know everything about everyone. Need something carried across town? Ask a caddy. Need to find a particular person in the maze of closes and tenements? A caddy can take you right to their door. Need information about anything at all? A caddy probably knows, and for the right price he'll tell you. They come from all over. Some are local lads who grew up in the old town. Others are Highlanders who came down looking for work and found this. The term comes from the French, people say. Cadet, a younger son, someone without an inheritance. Someone who has to make his own way. This one is middle-aged, with a weathered face and a blue bonnet pulled low over his forehead. He carries a basket on his back, held by a leather strap around his forehead. His coat is worn but clean, the badge polished and visible. "Young master," he says, "wigmaker's boy, aren't you?" You nod, wary. Caddies don't just start conversations for no reason. "I know your master. Good man. Pays his debts on time. Makes wigs for some important people, doesn't he? Lawyers, judges, men who sit in the courts and decide who lives and who dies. What do you want?" The caddy smiles. It's not a friendly smile. "I want to share some information," he says. "Free of charge. Consider it a gift. Nothing's free in Edinburgh, true enough. But some gifts have strings attached and some don't. This one, you decide what to do with." He leans closer. His breath smells of ale and onions. "Word is," he says quietly, "there's ships gathering at French ports. Men and arms. Not merchants. Soldiers. And not just any soldiers. Scots who've been in French service. Highland regiments. Men who know how to fight. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Who says?" The caddy shrugs. "People who know. People who've been watching the ports. Who read the letters that come on trading ships. The young prince, they say. Charles Edward himself. He's finally going to make his move. This summer maybe, or spring. The French are backing him. Ships and gold and promises of more to come. You look around. The street is crowded. Anyone could be listening. Why are you telling me this? Because your master's customers include some powerful men, the caddy says. Men who might want to know which way the wind is blowing, and because a smart lad like you might want to think about where his loyalties lie before things get complicated. He touches his bonnet and disappears into the crowd, leaving you standing there with your basket of horsehair and meat and powder, your heart beating faster than it should. The rest of the day passes in a blur. You work at your bench, preparing materials, sorting hair by length and colour, mixing powder into the exact consistency Mr. Crawford demands. But your mind is elsewhere. Ships gathering at French ports. The young prince making his move. It might be nothing. Rumours spread through Edinburgh like fire through dry wood. Half of what the caddies say is exaggeration or outright invention. They trade in information the way others trade in goods, and some of their goods are counterfeit. But what if it's true? What if Charles Edward Stuart really is coming? What if the dream of the old Jacobites, the men who fought in the 15 and lost, is about to become reality? You think about Malcolm's uncle with his missing fingers, about the songs sung quietly in back rooms, about the soldier in his red coat standing at the corner of a close, watching. Edinburgh is a garrisoned city. The castle above is full of government troops. They're here specifically because of the threat of Jacobite rebellion. If the prince lands, if he raises an army, this is where the battle lines will be drawn, and you're here, in the middle of it, with no money, no power, no say in what happens next. That evening, Agnes comes to check on Duncan. She brings more herbs, different ones this time, for strength rather than fever. Duncan is sitting up now, sipping broth that Mistress Crawford grudgingly provided. He looks terrible but alive, which is better than the alternative. You walk Agnes down to the third-floor landing. It's the only place you can talk without being overheard, and even then you keep your voices low. Thank you, you say, for the herbs, for everything. She looks at you with those dark eyes. He would have done the same for me, if our situations were reversed. You're not sure that's true. You're not sure anyone would do anything for anyone in this city unless there was something in it for them, but you don't say that. I heard something today, you say instead, from a caddie, about the prince, about ships gathering. Agnes's expression changes, becomes guarded. People hear lots of things. But you've heard it too, you say, haven't you? She doesn't answer directly. Instead, she looks up the stairwell, making sure they're alone. My mistress has a brother in France, she says quietly. He writes to her sometimes, letters that she burns after reading. And? Agnes hesitates. He says it's true. The prince is coming. Maybe this summer, maybe sooner. And when he does, everything changes. You stand there in the half-darkness of the stairwell, two servants at the bottom of Edinburgh's social ladder, discussing the fate of kingdoms. What will you do, you ask? When it happens, she almost laughs. What can I do? I'm a servant. I'll do what I'm told, same as always. Keep my head down. Hope the bullets don't find me. But that's not really an answer, and you both know it. I should go, she says. Mistress Douglas will wonder where I am. She turns to descend the stairs, then she stops. Jamie. Yeah? Be careful. The caddie who told you about the ships. He might have been testing you, seeing which way you lean. Why would he do that? Because that's what everyone's doing now. Figuring out who's loyal to the crown and who's loyal to the cause. When the time comes, those lists will matter. She disappears down the stairs, leaving you alone with that thought. You climb back up to your room. Duncan is asleep again, his breathing steady and normal. Malcolm isn't back yet. Gone to the tavern again, probably, or somewhere else he doesn't talk about. William is reading by candlelight, the same book he's been working through for weeks. It's a Bible, you realise. He's reading it cover to cover, like a man trying to find answers to questions he won't speak aloud. You lie on your pallet and stare at the ceiling. The wood is dark with years of smoke. Cracks run through it like the lines on an old man's face. Somewhere in the building a baby is crying. Somewhere else people are arguing. The sounds of Edinburgh at night. The sounds of 50,000 people crammed into a space meant for maybe 10,000. All of them trying to survive. The straw crunches beneath you. The blanket scratches against your skin. Outside your window, the city is settling into darkness. The endless smoke rises from chimneys, catching the last light of day and turning the sky a muddy orange. Somewhere out there, a drunk is singing one of the old songs, the ones about bonny princes and rightful kings. His voice echoes through the close, bouncing off stone walls that have heard centuries of such songs. Other voices join in, a chorus of longing and defiance drifting up through the night air. Ships gathering at French ports. The prince is coming. Everything changes. You think about what Agnes said, about lists being made, about people figuring out who's loyal to the crown and who's loyal to the cause. What would happen to you if you chose wrong? What would happen to Duncan, who's too weak to fight for anyone? What would happen to Agnes, caught between a mistress with secret letters and a city that will tear itself apart when the time comes? And what about the men in the coffee houses? The philosophers and economists and historians building their new way of thinking. What happens to them when armies march and blood runs in the streets? Do their theories about reason and progress survive the chaos? You don't have answers. You're 16 years old. You're a wigmaker's apprentice. You don't make history. You just live through it if you're lucky. You close your eyes. But sleep is a long time coming, and when it finally arrives, your dreams are full of ships and soldiers, and a young prince with a face you've never seen, leading an army of ghosts through streets that burn. Summer comes to Edinburgh like a thief. One day you're still wearing your heaviest coat and shivering in the morning air. The next, the sun is beating down on the cobblestones, and the smell of the city has intensified to something that makes your eyes water. Heat changes everything. The closes become ovens. The stone walls that held in the cold through winter now hold in the warmth, trapping it in narrow passages where the air doesn't move. You walk through them and feel the heat pressing against you from all sides. Above, below, left, right. There's no escape from it. The smells that were merely unpleasant in February become unbearable in July. The waste that froze solid in the gutters now bakes and festers in the sun. It doesn't just smell anymore. It has texture. It has weight. You can taste it on your tongue when you breathe. You learn to breathe through your mouth. Everyone does. It doesn't really help, but it feels like you're doing something. At night, the heat doesn't break. It just softens slightly. You lie on your pallet in the cramped room on the 5th floor, the straw scratching against your sweating skin, and you try to sleep. Duncan coughs in his corner. William reads his Bible by candlelight, the flame adding its own small heat to the room. Malcolm is restless, turning and turning on his pallet, muttering things you can't quite hear. The days blur together in a haze of heat and work. You sit at your bench in the shop, your fingers sticky with sweat, trying to work horsehair that doesn't want to cooperate. The powder clumps, the glue dries too fast. Everything is harder in summer. But there's something else in the air this summer. Something that doesn't have anything to do with the weather. Rumours. They've been circulating for months, of course. The caddie's words about ships gathering in French ports. The whispers in taverns about the young prince making his move. But now the rumours have teeth. Now they come with details. Now they come with dates. The prince has been planning this for years, people say. Ever since his father's failed attempt in 1715, ever since the dream of a Stuart restoration became a cause passed down from father to son. The young prince grew up in Rome, in exile, dreaming of a throne he'd never sat on. And now, finally, he's doing something about it. August. That's when you first hear a specific date. A man came into the shop one morning, a customer, one of the advocates who buys his wigs from Mr. Crawford. You've seen him before, a nervous man with soft hands and darting eyes. Today those eyes are wilder than usual. He was sweating more than the weather warranted. His wig was askew on his head. His coat was buttoned wrong. He pulled Mr. Crawford aside and spoke to him in low tones while you pretended to work and listened as hard as you could. Your hands moved automatically, combing horsehair, while your ears strained to catch every word. The prince has landed. Those 4 words. You heard them clearly even through the muffled conversation. The prince has landed. Your hands stopped moving. Your heart did something strange in your chest. Where? Somewhere in the west. The Hebrides. Some island nobody's ever heard of. Eriskay, someone said later. A tiny speck of land at the edge of the world. How many men? Not many. A few dozen maybe. 7 men of Moidart, they're calling them. The prince and his closest advisers, landing on a beach with nothing but hope and a handful of weapons. But that's not the point, is it? He's here, on Scottish soil, and now we wait to see what happens. The advocate left without his wig, said he'd send someone for it later. He had other things to attend to, arrangements to make. Decisions to consider, the kind of decisions that could mean life or death depending on which way the wind blows. Mr. Crawford stood in the middle of his shop for a long time after that, just standing there, staring at nothing. His face was blank in that way you've learned to recognize, the way people look when they're thinking things they don't want anyone to see. When he finally moved, he went to a cabinet in the back room and pulled out a bottle of whiskey that you didn't know existed. Good whiskey, Highland whiskey, the kind that costs more than you make in a month. He poured himself a glass and drank it in one swallow. Then he poured another. Then he looked at you. You heard nothing, he said. You understand. Nothing. You nodded. Whatever you think you heard, whatever you think you know, you keep it to yourself. These are dangerous times. A careless word can get a man hanged. I understand. Good. Get back to work. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the city has transformed. The garrison in the castle has doubled, then doubled again. Red-coated soldiers march through the streets in formations now, not just the occasional patrol you used to see. Their boots thunder on the cobblestones. Their muskets gleam in the summer sun. Their faces are hard and watchful. Cavalry assembles before the fortified gates of the castle, horses stamping and snorting, riders checking their weapons. The jingle of harness and the creak of leather fills the air. These are professional soldiers, veterans, men who know how to kill and have done it before. The message is clear. We're ready. We're watching. Don't even think about it. But the other message is also clear. They're scared. The government troops are here because the government is scared. Because a prince with a handful of men has landed on an island in the west, and suddenly everything that seems stable and permanent is revealed to be fragile as glass. Because the Jacobite cause, which everyone thought was dead after 1715, is stirring again. You can feel the fear in the city, in the way people talk in lowered voices, in the way they glance over their shoulders before saying anything, in the way the taverns have grown quieter, the songs more careful, the laughter more nervous. Everyone is waiting. Everyone is watching. Everyone is trying to figure out which way to jump when the time comes. Malcolm left 3 days ago. He didn't say goodbye properly, just woke you up in the middle of the night, his hand on your shoulder, his face close to yours in the darkness. "I'm going," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. Duncan was snoring. William was breathing the slow breath of deep sleep. Malcolm had been careful not to wake them. Where? North. My uncle's connections. The clans are gathering. Cameron of Lochiel has declared for the prince. MacDonald of Clanranald. More every day. There's going to be fighting, and I want to be on the right side of it. Which side is that? He looked at you like you'd asked a stupid question. His eyes were bright in the darkness, excited, alive in a way you'd never seen before. The winning side, he said. The prince is going to march south. He's going to take Edinburgh. He's going to take London. And when it's all over, the men who stood with him will be rewarded. Lands, titles, everything that was taken from us will be returned. You wanted to argue. You wanted to point out that the last rising failed, that the government has more soldiers, more guns, more money, that the Highlands against the might of Britain is not a fair fight. But you didn't say any of that, because you could see that Malcolm wasn't really talking to you. He was talking to himself, convincing himself, and nothing you said was going to change his mind. Be careful, you said instead. He grinned. That reckless grin you'd seen 100 times in the tavern when he'd had too much ale. Careful's for old men, he said. I'm going to be a hero. And then he was gone. Down the stairs, out into the night, heading for the Highlands where an army was supposedly gathering around a prince most people had never seen. His few possessions bundled in a cloth sack over his shoulder, his footsteps fading into silence. You didn't sleep the rest of that night. Mr. Crawford was furious when he found out. An apprentice abandoning his contract is a serious matter. There are guild rules, legal consequences, penalties that can follow a man for the rest of his life. But what can he do? Send the constables after Malcolm? Report him to the authorities? In these times, when nobody knows who's loyal to whom, that kind of action could bring trouble nobody wants. The constables might start asking questions. They might wonder why Mr. Crawford's apprentice ran off to join the rebels. They might wonder what Mr. Crawford himself thinks about the Stuart cause. So Malcolm's name is simply not spoken anymore. His pallet is empty. His tools are given to Duncan, who's recovered enough to work again. Life goes on, the way life always goes on. But you think about him. Every night lying in the dark you wonder where he is, whether he's reached wherever he was going, whether he's picked up a sword or a musket and joined the prince's army, whether he's still alive. The Highlands are a long way from Edinburgh, and the news that comes from there is scattered and unreliable. One day you hear the clans are rallying by the thousands, the next day you hear the rising has already failed. You don't know what to believe. Agnes thinks he made the right choice. You've been seeing more of her lately, not in any official way. Neither of you has time for courting, even if your masters would allow it. But you find excuses to cross paths. You linger in the stairwell when you know she'll be passing through. You offer to carry water for her when your own duties allow. You time your errands to coincide with hers. Little moments, stolen conversations, the brush of fingers when you hand her a bucket, the way she looks at you when she thinks you're not watching, the warmth in her voice when she says your name. It's foolish. You know it's foolish. You're an apprentice with 5 years left on your contract. She's a servant with no contract at all, kept at her mistress's pleasure. Neither of you has any right to be thinking about the future, but you think about it anyway. Because what else is there to think about? The war coming? The chaos approaching? Better to think about dark eyes and a gentle voice, and a future that probably won't happen but feels good to imagine. One evening, a few days after Malcolm left, You manage to find her alone on the third-floor landing. The light is fading. The sun is setting somewhere beyond the tenements, painting the little sliver of sky you can see in shades of orange and pink. Agnes is sitting on the top step, her hands folded in her lap, her face thoughtful. "Do you think they'll win?" you ask. "The Jacobites." She considers the question seriously. She always does. It's one of the things you like about her. She doesn't give quick answers to hard questions. She thinks before she speaks. "I think they might," she says finally, "if they're smart, if the clans rally, if France sends what they've promised, ships and soldiers and gold, if everything falls into place. And if they don't, then they'll die. And anyone who helped them will die too, and things will go back to how they were, maybe worse. The government doesn't forget. The government doesn't forgive. You stand there in the shadows, listening to the sounds of the building around you, a baby crying somewhere above. A man's voice raised in anger below, the endless creaking of wood and settling of stone, the soundtrack of Edinburgh, the music of survival. "What would you do," you ask, "if the prince came to Edinburgh, if he took the city?" Agnes doesn't answer right away. She looks up the stairwell, then down, making sure you're alone. Her voice drops even lower when she speaks again. "My father," she says quietly. "He was out in the 15, before I was born. You didn't know that. He fought at Sheriffmuir, on the left wing where the Jacobites won their part of the battle. He thought they'd won everything. They hadn't. The army fell apart anyway. And my father came home with one arm missing and nothing to show for it but scars and nightmares. That's awful," she shrugs. "It's what happens to losers in wars. The winners get glory. The losers get scars and empty sleeves and children who grow up hungry. My father spent the rest of his life as a beggar on the streets of Glasgow. Died there too, in an alley, in the rain. Nobody even found him for 3 days, so you wouldn't support the prince." I didn't say that. My father hated the Hanoverians until the day he died. Called King George a German pretender. Sang the old songs when he was drunk, which was often. He believed in the cause even after it cost him everything. "And you?" Agnes is quiet for a long moment. The light continues to fade around you. The shadows grow longer. "I believe in surviving," she says. "That's all. Whatever happens, I plan to be alive when it's over. You understand that. You feel the same way, mostly. But there's something else, too. Something that stirs when you hear the old songs. Something that wonders what it would be like to fight for something bigger than yourself. To be part of something that matters. To have your life mean more than wigs and powder and endless days at a workbench. You don't say any of that to Agnes. She's too practical for such thoughts. But you think them, late at night, when sleep won't come. It's the first week of September when everything changes. You're in the shop, working on a wig for some minor lord who needs it for a dinner party. The horsehair is cooperating for once. The powder is mixing smoothly. It's the kind of work that lets your mind wander. And then the bells start ringing. Not the normal bells, not the church bells calling people to worship, not the Tronkirk marking the hour. These are alarm bells, warning bells, the kind of bells that mean something is very wrong. Mr. Crawford goes to the door and looks out. You follow him. The high street is chaos. People are running, some toward the castle, scrambling up the steep streets toward the safety of those ancient walls, some away from it, fleeing down toward the cannon gate and the roads that lead out of the city. Soldiers are shouting orders that nobody follows. A sedan chair tips over as its carriers flee, spilling an elderly woman onto the cobblestones. Nobody stops to help her. She lies there screaming while the crowd surges around her. What's happening, you ask? A man runs past. He's dressed like a clerk, ink stains on his fingers, spectacles knocked askew on his face, terror in his eyes. "The Jacobites," he shouts. "They've beaten the army. They're coming." Beaten the army? The government sent an army north to stop the prince. General Cope, they called him. Sir John Cope. He was supposed to crush the rebellion before it could spread. He had trained soldiers, regular infantry, artillery, cavalry, everything the ragtag Highland army didn't have. But something went wrong. Later, you'll learn the details. A battle at a place called Preston Pans, just a few miles east of Edinburgh. The Highland charge, terrifying and unstoppable. Government troops breaking and running after barely 10 minutes of fighting. Cope himself fleeing on horseback while his army dissolved behind him. But right now, all you know is that people are panicking. That the prince's army is somewhere close. That the defenders who were supposed to protect Edinburgh been scattered like leaves in a storm. That everything you thought you knew about how the world worked has been turned upside down in a single morning. "Go inside," Mr. Crawford says. His voice is calm. Too calm. "Bar the door?" "What about you?" "I need to go to the Guildhall. There's going to be decisions made. Plans." He grabs his coat and wig and disappears into the chaos, leaving you standing in the doorway of the shop. You should go inside. Bar the door like he said. Hide and wait until whatever's happening outside is over. But instead, you step out onto the high street. The flow of people has found a direction now. Most are heading up toward the castle. The castle is the safest place in Edinburgh. Those walls have stood for centuries. Those gates have held against siege after siege. If anywhere can hold against the Highlanders, it's the castle. But the castle can't hold everyone. There are 50,000 people in this city, and the castle garrison can barely hold a few thousand at most. The rest will have to take their chances. You push against the flow, heading downhill, toward the Cannon Gate, toward Holyrood Palace, where the ancient kings of Scotland once held court, toward wherever Agnes is. The crowd's thin as you get further from the castle. Down here people aren't running. They're standing in doorways, watching, waiting. Some of them are smiling. Not everyone in Edinburgh is loyal to King George. You find Agnes on the third-floor landing exactly where you hoped she'd be. She's calm, calmer than you, certainly. Her mistress is in hysterics somewhere in the apartment, wailing about invasion and murder and the end of civilization. But Agnes stands at the window, looking out at the city with an expression you can't quite read. "They won," she says when she sees you. "The prince, the Jacobites, Preston Pans. I heard from a footman who came running from the high street. The government army's destroyed. General Cope is running for his life, and the prince is coming here. What happens now? Now?" She turns to face you. Her dark eyes meet yours. Now we find out what kind of city this is. Through the window you can see smoke rising from somewhere to the east. The sound of bells has faded to a distant clamour. The sun is setting behind the castle, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. It looks like the city is on fire. It looks like the end of the world, but it's not. It's just the beginning of something. A city trapped between its medieval past and something new. Something nobody asked for, but everyone's going to have to live with. The prince is coming, and Edinburgh will never be the same. The Highlanders come at dawn. You're awake when it happens. Haven't slept much, honestly. The whole city has been holding its breath since the news from Preston Pans waiting to see what comes next. And now it's here. You're at the window of your 5th floor room when you see them, a column of men marching down the cannon gate from the east. Not soldiers in the way you understand soldiers. No neat red coats, no polished boots, no drums beating time. These men wear kilts and plaids in colours that seem strange against the grey Edinburgh stone. Tartans of green and blue and red, patterns you don't recognise, patterns that belong to clans and families from places you've never been. The Highlands, that wild country to the north where the old ways still hold. They carry swords at their hips. Claymores, Malcolm called them once. Great two-handed blades that can cut a man in half. Some carry muskets, some carry axes, some carry round shields studded with metal. One man, taller than the rest, carries a weapon you've never seen before. A long pole with a curved blade at the end. A Lochaber axe, you'll learn later. Good for pulling men off horses. They move like water flowing downhill. No formations, no marching in step, no drums or fifes. Just a steady stream of men who look like they've been walking for days and could walk for days more. Their faces are weathered. Their clothes are travel-stained. Some are barefoot despite the cold cobblestones, and they're singing. It's not a marching song like the government soldiers sing. It's something older, something that rises and falls in patterns you don't understand, in words you can't follow. A song in Gaelic, the old tongue, the language of the mountains. It sounds like sadness and defiance mixed together. Duncan joins you at the window. He's been recovering well, strong enough to work again, though he still tires quickly. Jesus, he says quietly. You don't say anything. There's nothing to say. The Netherbow port stood open for them. That's the gate at the eastern end of the High Street, the boundary between Edinburgh proper and the Cannon Gate beyond. Someone opened it in the night, someone loyal to the Prince, or someone who saw which way the wind was blowing and made a practical decision. Either way, the city is theirs now. Within an hour, the Highland army has spread through Edinburgh like spilled wine on a tablecloth. They're everywhere, in the closes and wynds, on the high street, in the grass market, gathered in groups talking in a language you don't understand. Gaelic, Agnes told you once, the old tongue, the language of the mountains. Some Edinburgh folk watch from doorways with expressions of fear. Others watch with something closer to hope. And some, the practical ones, are already figuring out how to do business with the new arrivals. War changes things, but commerce adapts. Mr. Crawford keeps the shop closed that first day. He stands by the window, watching the street, his face unreadable. Will they loot? You ask. He shakes his head slowly. The Prince wants to be king. Kings don't. He's right, as it turns out. The Highlanders are disciplined. Rough, yes. Intimidating, certainly. But they pay for what they take. They don't force their way into homes. They don't hurt people who don't give them reason to. That first night, the Prince himself enters Edinburgh. You don't see it happen. By then it's dark, and you're not about to wander the streets after sunset with an army of strangers occupying the city. But you hear about it the next morning. Everyone hears about it. Charles Edward Stuart rode in through the Netherbow port on a white horse. He wore a tartan coat and a blue bonnet with a white cockade. He smiled and waved to the crowds that gathered to watch. Some cheered, some wept, some just stared. He set up headquarters at Holyrood Palace, the ancient home of Scottish kings. The same palace where Mary Queen of Scots once held court. The same palace that's been mostly empty for decades, a relic of a time when Scotland had its own monarchs. Now it has one again. Sort of. The castle still holds. That's the strange thing about Edinburgh during those weeks. The Jacobites control the city, but the castle above remains in government hands. The Union flag still flies from the highest tower. Government soldiers still man the walls, and every so often they fire their cannons down at the city below, just to remind everyone that they're still there. The first time the cannons fire, you nearly fall off your bench. It's a Tuesday morning. You're working on a wig. The shop is open again because life goes on even during rebellions, and anyway, some of the Highland officers need wigs for formal occasions. They pay well, too. Gold coins with unfamiliar faces on them. French money, Mr. Crawford says. He doesn't seem to care whose face is on the coin as long as the gold is real. The blast shakes the windows. Dust falls from the ceiling. Someone screams in the street outside. You run to the door and look up. Smoke is rising from the castle walls. A second blast follows, then a third. The shots aren't aimed at anything in particular, just a reminder, a statement. We're still here. We haven't given up. The Highlanders in the street don't seem particularly bothered. A few of them look up at the castle and make rude gestures. One laughs and says something in Gaelic that makes his companions laugh too. It becomes routine after a while. The cannon fire, the smoke, the casual defiance of the men who now control the streets. You learn to keep working through it. Everyone does. Life under occupation is strange. The courts aren't sitting anymore. The judges have fled or gone into hiding. The advocates who used to strut down the high street in their wigs have mostly vanished. Some went to the castle before the gates closed. Some fled south to Newcastle or York. Some are still here but keeping their heads down, waiting to see which way things go. The city guard has melted away. Those tough old men who used to patrol the closes with their staves and lanterns have simply stopped appearing. Nobody gives them orders anymore. Nobody pays them. So they've gone home, or joined one side or the other, or disappeared into the crowds. The old systems of order and control have simply stopped working, but new systems emerge. The Jacobites have their own officers patrolling the streets. They're fair, mostly. They break up fights. They stop thefts. They keep order in their own way. One afternoon, you see a Highland officer drag a man out of a tavern by his collar. The man had been cheating at cards, apparently. The officer makes him return the money he stole, then gives him a kick in the backside and tells him to behave. Different from the old city guard. More direct. Less paperwork. The churches still hold services. St. Giles is open every Sunday, and the minister preaches carefully neutral sermons about God's will and the importance of peace. He doesn't mention the prince or the king or anything that might get him in trouble with either side. The shops still open, the markets still function, people still need to eat, still need clothes, still need all the things they needed before the world turned upside down, and life goes on. The market's still open. The flesh market still smells of blood and meat. The vendors in the grass market still haggle over grain and livestock. Money still changes hands. Deals are still struck. The only difference is that now some of the customers wear kilts and speak Gaelic, and sometimes they pay with French gold instead of British shillings. Some things don't change even when everything changes. Agnes finds you on the third-floor landing one evening, about a week into the occupation. The sun is setting, and the castle's silhouette is stark against the orange sky. "Have you seen him?" she asks. "Seen who?" "The prince." You shake your head. "I haven't either, but I've heard things." "What things?" She leans against the wall, tired from a long day of work. Her mistress has been in a state since the occupation began, demanding constant attention, constantly worried about what's going to happen next. They say he's young, handsome, that he dances at Holyrood every night with all the ladies of Edinburgh who've decided to support the cause, that he speaks with a strange accent, not quite Scottish, not quite Italian, that he drinks too much sometimes, that he believes God is on his side. Sounds like a lot of rumours. Agnes smiles faintly. Everything's rumours now. Nobody knows what's true and what's not. We just have to wait and see. She's quiet for a moment. Malcolm's with them, she says. Someone saw him in the street wearing a sword and a white cockade. Is he all right? Looked healthy enough. Looked happy even. Like he'd found something he was looking for. You think about Malcolm, about the nights in the tavern, listening to him talk about his uncle and the old cause, about the morning he left, his face set with determination, his bundle slung over his shoulder. He made his choice, you say. We all make choices. The question is whether we have to live with them or die with them. The days blur together. You work, you eat, you sleep fitfully. You steal moments with Agnes when you can. You watch the Highlanders in the street and try to understand what's happening. The Prince holds court at Holyrood. Important men come and go. Plans are made. Orders are given. An army is gathering, growing larger every day as more clans arrive from the north. They say he's going to march south, into England, all the way to London if he can manage it. They say he's going to put his father on the throne and restore the Stuart line. They say everything's going to change. But here, on the 5th floor of a tenement on the high street, in a city caught between a castle that won't surrender and a prince who won't leave, nothing feels like it's changing at all. You still wake up cold. You still eat thin broth and stale bread. You still work at your bench, shaping horsehair into wigs for men who think they're important. You still breathe through your mouth to avoid the smell. You still fall asleep to the sounds of a city that never truly rests. The castle fires its cannons every few days. The Highlanders ignore them. The prince dances at Holyrood. The merchants count their coins. The poor struggle to survive, same as always. Occupation, you're learning, is just another kind of normal. One afternoon in early October you finally see him. You're on an errand for Mr. Crawford, a delivery to a house near the Cannon Gate, a wig for some minor noble who's thrown his lot in with the Jacobites. The man wants to look his best at the prince's court, apparently. Even rebellions need proper grooming. The wig is wrapped in cloth and tucked under your arm. You're walking fast, head down, trying not to attract attention. The Cannon Gate is busier than usual today. More soldiers, more horses. Something's happening. And then you hear cheering. You look up. A procession is coming up the Cannon Gate from Holyrood. Horsemen first, sitting tall on their mounts, swords at their sides. Then footmen in mismatched uniforms, some wearing the white cockade, some carrying flags. Then a coach pulled by matched grey horses, the finest horses you've seen since the occupation began. People are lining the street, some cheering, some waving white handkerchiefs, some just watching with expressions you can't read. A woman near you is crying. An old man has taken off his hat and is holding it over his heart. And there, riding at the head of the procession, is a young man on a grey horse. He's wearing a tartan coat over a white shirt, the fabric fine enough that it catches the light. A blue bonnet with a white cockade sits at an angle on his head. He's smiling, waving to the crowd, every inch the confident prince. The rightful king, his supporters would say. The pretender, his enemies would call him. He's also younger than you expected, Mid-20s maybe. 24, someone said. Younger than Malcolm. Younger than some of the men who've come to fight for him. Handsome in a soft, almost pretty way. There's a look about him that reminds you of the portraits you've seen in wealthy homes, a look of breeding, of noble blood. But there's something else too, something about his eyes that catches your attention, something distant, like he's not entirely here, not entirely looking at the people cheering for him, but at something beyond them, a vision only he can see, a crown that doesn't exist yet, a throne in London that he believes is rightfully his. For a moment his gaze sweeps across the crowd and lands on you. You freeze. The noise of the crowd fades. The cheering becomes a distant roar. For that single heartbeat, there's only you and the prince, separated by a few feet of cobblestone and a gulf of wealth and birth and destiny. His eyes are blue, pale blue, like winter sky. Then his gaze moves on, his smile unchanged, his hand still waving. You're nobody, just a wig-maker's apprentice in a crowd of hundreds. He's already forgotten you exist, but you won't forget him. You deliver the wig, you collect the payment, you walk back to the shop in a daze. The streets are quieter now, the procession has moved on, the crowds have dispersed. Edinburgh is settling back into its new normal, occupation, waiting, not knowing what comes next. Above you, the castle still squats on its massive foundation, 300 feet of stone and defiance. The Union flag snaps in the wind. The government soldiers watch from the walls. They're still up there, still waiting, still refusing to surrender. And down here, in the city that belongs to neither side, life continues. That night, lying on your pallet, staring at the smoke-stained ceiling, you think about that moment, about the look in the prince's eyes, about what it means to believe in something so completely that you'd risk everything for it. The prince believes he's going to win. You could see it in his face. He thinks he's going to march south, take London, put his father on the throne. He thinks God is on his side. He thinks destiny is on his side. Maybe he's right. Or maybe he's a young man on a grey horse, riding toward a disaster he can't see coming. You think about Malcolm, somewhere out there with a sword at his hip and a white cockade on his bonnet. About Agnes, trying to survive in a household where the mistress corresponds with exiles in France. About Duncan, still coughing sometimes at night. His lungs never quite right since the fever. About yourself, a wig-maker's apprentice who doesn't matter to anyone, caught in the middle of something he didn't ask for. The cannons from the castle boom in the distance. A reminder, a warning, a statement that nothing is settled yet. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will be another day of occupation, another day of uncertainty, another day of waiting to see what happens next. The prince will hold court at Holyrood. The castle will fly the Union flag. The merchants will count their coins. The poor will struggle to survive. And you'll wake up and do it all again. But tonight, you dream of horses and tartans and a prince with winter sky eyes who looked right through you, seeing something you can't imagine, reaching for a future that may never come. Outside, Edinburgh sleeps. Or pretends to sleep. A city trapped between two flags, two kings, two possible futures. The wind carries the smell of smoke and stone and the distant salt of the sea. And somewhere, in palaces you'll never see, powerful men are making decisions that will shape what comes next. You sleep through it all. Tomorrow will come soon enough. They leave on a cold morning in late October. You watch from the window as the Highland Army marches out of Edinburgh, heading south toward England. toward London, toward the throne that the prince believes belongs to his father. The sound reaches you first. Pipes, those strange wailing instruments that the Highlanders carry. Music that doesn't sound like any music you've heard before. It sounds like grief and defiance mixed together, like something ancient waking up after a long sleep. Then the drums, a steady rhythm that carries up through the closes and winds, the heartbeat of an army on the move. It takes hours for them all to pass, clan after clan, regiment after regiment, men in tartans carrying weapons their grandfathers carried, claymores strapped to backs, muskets over shoulders, round shields painted with symbols you don't recognise. Some are singing, old songs in Gaelic, passed down through generations. Some are silent, faces set, eyes forward. Some look back at the city they're leaving behind. A wife, a child, a place that might not exist when they return. Most don't look back. They've already said their goodbyes. You spot a few faces you recognise from the occupation. A big man with red hair who used to patrol near the shop. A young soldier, barely older than you, who once asked for directions in broken English. They're part of something now, part of history. And you're up here, watching through a window. The prince rides at the front. You can just make him out in the distance. That grey horse, that blue bonnet with its white cockade, that straight-backed confidence of a man who believes he's doing God's work. Around him, the clan chiefs ride on horses of their own, men whose names are spoken with reverence or fear, depending on who's speaking, and then they're gone. The last stragglers disappear down the cannon gate toward Holyrood and the road south. The sound of pipes fades to nothing. The streets fall quiet. It's over. Or at least, this part is over. The streets feel empty after that. Not empty of people. There are still thousands living here, going about their business, trying to survive. But empty of something else. That strange energy that came with the occupation. That sense that anything could happen. A skeleton force remains. Enough to hold the gates and patrol the streets. Enough to remind everyone that the city still belongs to the Jacobites, even if their army is somewhere in England now. The castle still holds too. That hasn't changed. The Union flag still flies. The cannons still fire occasionally. The government soldiers still watch from the walls. 2 flags, 2 armies, 1 city caught between them, and you caught between everything. Winter comes early that year. The first snow falls in November. Not much, just a dusting that melts by noon. But it's enough to remind everyone what's coming. The cold that kills, the darkness that stretches from mid-afternoon to mid-morning. The hunger that gnaws when food is scarce and prices are high. By the end of the month the snow is staying, piling up in the closes, freezing in the gutters, turning the cobblestones into treacherous sheets of ice. You wear everything you own at once. 2 shirts, your coat, a scarf that Agnes gave you, knitted from scraps of wool she saved from her mistress's cast-offs. It's not enough. It's never enough. The cold finds its way through every layer. At night, you and Duncan and William pile your blankets together. Body heat is the only heat that's free. You wake up pressed against Duncan's back, his breathing steady and warm. It should feel strange. It doesn't. It's survival. Food is harder to find now. The flesh market has less meat. What's there costs more. Mistress Crawford stretches the broth thinner and thinner, adding water until it's barely more than flavoured heat. You eat it anyway. You'd eat anything. You spend more time in the shop now. Mr. Crawford doesn't have as many customers as before. The wealthy Jacobites who needed wigs for court have marched south with the army. The advocates and judges who used to buy from him are hiding or fled. Business is slow, but slow is good. Slow means time. Time to sit at your bench and think. Time to watch the snow fall outside the window, drifting down past the stone facades of the buildings across the street. Time to wonder where Malcolm is, whether he's still alive, whether the army has reached London yet. Time to imagine other lives, other futures, other versions of yourself in other places. Time to see Agnes. She comes by most evenings now, not openly, that wouldn't be proper. But she finds excuses, bringing herbs for Duncan, who still coughs sometimes, delivering a message from her mistress to someone in the building, just passing through on her way somewhere else. You meet on the third-floor landing, your place now, yours and hers. A few stolen minutes in the half-dark, talking in whispers, standing close enough that you can smell the lavender she uses to scent her mistress's linens. What do you talk about? Everything. Nothing. The small details of your days, the work that never ends, the food that's never quite enough, the cold that seeps through stone walls and wooden floors. She tells you about her mistress, an older woman, widowed twice, who spends her days writing letters and receiving visitors, a woman with dangerous friends in dangerous places. Agnes doesn't say much about the specifics. She knows better, but you can read between the lines. You tell her about the shop, about Mr. Crawford's silences and Mistress Crawford's stinginess, about Duncan's cough that won't quite go away, about William's endless reading, his lips moving silently as he works through his Bible. Sometimes you don't talk at all. Sometimes you just stand there together, close enough to touch, but not quite touching, listening to the building breathe around you. Those silences feel like something too, like words that don't need to be spoken. You talk about the war too, what little you know of it. News travels slowly in winter. Rumours travel faster, but rumours aren't reliable. Someone heard that the army reached Carlisle. Someone else heard they took Manchester without a fight. A third person swears they've already reached London and the king has fled to Hanover. You don't know what to believe. You've learned that wanting something to be true doesn't make it true. Agnes is more practical than you. She listens to the rumours and sorts them into piles. Likely, unlikely, impossible. They're still marching, she says one evening. That's all we know for certain. They haven't won yet and they haven't lost yet. What happens if they win? Then everything changes. The Stuarts come back. The Hanoverians leave. Scotland gets a king again. Or at least a king's son. Would that be good? She's quiet for a moment. It would be different. Different isn't always good, but it's not always bad either. And if they lose, then everything stays the same, or gets worse. The winners punish the losers. That's how it's always been. You stand there in the shadows, listening to the buildings settle around you, footsteps above, voices below, the eternal sounds of people living on top of each other, sharing walls and floors and the air they breathe. What do you want, you ask? Agnes looks at you, really looks, in a way she doesn't usually. I want to not be afraid, she says. I want to wake up one morning and not wonder if today's the day everything falls apart. Is that possible? She almost smiles. Probably not. But you asked what I want, not what's possible. December arrives with ice. The North Loch freezes over. Children skate on it, or try to. They fall down more than they glide, their laughter carrying across the ice like something from a different world. Adults cross it on foot, saving the long walk around. Old women carrying baskets. Merchants with carts that slide and skid. Everyone taking risks because the cold makes everything a risk. The cold is brutal now. It gets into everything. Your fingers ache at your workbench, stiff and clumsy on the horsehair. Your breath fogs the air even inside, hanging in clouds that drift before dissolving. Frost forms on the inside of windows. Water in the bucket by the door develops a skin of ice overnight. And still no definitive news from the south. Until one day there is. You're in the shop when the messenger arrives. A young man on a lathered horse, the animal's flanks steaming in the cold. He's riding up the high street from the cannon gate, shouting something you can't quite make out. His voice is hoarse. He's been shouting for a while. People emerge from doorways, coats pulled tight, breath pluming. They gather in the street despite the cold, drawn by the urgency in the messenger's voice. Children run alongside the horse, trying to hear what he's saying. The messenger stops in front of the Tronkirk, under the clock tower that marks the hours of Edinburgh's days. He stands up in his stirrups. His face is red from cold and exertion. His cloak is caked with road mud and melting snow. He delivers his news in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Derby. The army reached Derby, a town in the heart of England, maybe 120 miles from London, closer than any Scottish army has come in generations, closer than anyone thought possible when they marched out of Edinburgh in October. But they're not going further, they're turning back. A murmur runs through the crowd. Some people gasp, some swear. One woman starts crying, though you can't tell if it's relief or grief. A man near you spits on the ground and mutters something about cowards. The messenger doesn't know all the details. Something about the promised French support never arriving. Ships that were supposed to land on the English coast, carrying soldiers and gold, but never came. Something about the English Jacobites not rising up the way the prince expected. They were supposed to flock to his banner. They didn't. Something about the generals overruling the prince and insisting on retreat. A council of war where the men who'd fought in real wars told the young prince that going forward meant death. It doesn't matter why. What matters is that it's over. Oh, the army's still intact. Still fighting, apparently. Still retreating north towards Scotland with government forces pursuing. But the dream of taking London, putting the Stuarts back on the throne, that dream died somewhere on the road between Derby and Carlisle, in a council of war held in a cold English town while the prince raged and wept. The crowd disperses slowly. Some people look relieved, some look devastated. Some, the practical ones, are already calculating what this means for business, for politics, for survival. You walk back into the shop and sit down at your bench. Mr. Crawford comes in a few minutes later. His face is unreadable. You heard? You ask. He nods. What now? Now? He pulls off his gloves, hangs up his coat. Now we wait. The army will come back to Scotland. There'll be more fighting, more chaos, and eventually one side will win and the other side will lose. And us? He looks at you with something that might be pity. We survive. That's what people like us do. The lords and princes fight their wars and people like us try not to get crushed underneath. He picks up a wig that's been waiting for its final touches, turns it over in his hands. Get back to work, he says. Whatever happens next, people will still need wigs. You get back to work. That night you find Agnes on the landing. She's already heard. Malcolm, you say. He's with the army. He's coming back this way, if he's still alive. You don't want to think about that. Agnes is quiet for a long moment, longer than usual. My mistress has been burning papers, she says finally, all day. Everything her brother ever sent her from France. She's afraid of what happens when the government comes back. Will they come back? She shrugs. The prince is retreating. The army is falling back. Sooner or later the government wins or the Jacobites win, and right now it's not looking good for the Jacobites. You stand there in the dark. The building creaks around you. Someone's cooking something that smells like cabbage and hope. If things go bad, you say, really bad. What will you do? Agnes doesn't answer immediately. When she does, her voice is barely above a whisper. There's a cousin in Glasgow, on my mother's side. She's married to a shopkeeper there. Nobody important, nobody political. You could go there, maybe, if I had to, if things got dangerous. She looks at you. What about you? You haven't thought about it. Not really. You've been so focused on surviving day to day that the idea of running, of starting over somewhere else hasn't crossed your mind. I don't know, you admit. I'm bound to Mr. Crawford for 5 more years. I can't just leave. You can if staying means dying. You don't have an answer for that. Above you, someone opens a door. Footsteps on the stairs. You both go quiet until the person passes. I should go, Agnes says, but she doesn't move. Not right away. Jamie. Yeah? Whatever happens. Whatever comes next. I'm glad we met. I'm glad you're here. And then she's gone. Down the stairs. Back to her mistress and the burning papers and whatever comes next. You climb up to your room. Duncan is asleep, his breathing steady, his face peaceful in the candlelight. William is reading his Bible by candlelight, his lips moving silently, his finger tracing lines of scripture. The empty space where Malcolm's pallet used to be feels larger than it should, a gap where a person used to exist. You lie down and stare at the ceiling. The smoke stains make patterns up there, shapes that change depending on how you look at them. A face, a horse, a crown. Your eyes find different pictures every night. Derby, 120 miles from London, so close, and now retreating. Somewhere out there, an army is marching north through the winter, sleeping in fields, crossing frozen rivers, fighting rearguard actions against government cavalry. Somewhere out there, Malcolm is carrying a sword he may or may not have used. Is he wounded? Is he afraid? Is he still singing those old songs, the ones about glory and victory? Somewhere out there, a prince is watching his dream collapse. The young man with the pale blue eyes, the one who looked through you on the cannon gate, the one who believed God was on his side. What does he believe now? And here, in a tenement on the high street, a wig-maker's apprentice is thinking about a servant girl with dark eyes and a cousin in Glasgow. The cold seeps through the walls. You can feel it in your bones. The building settles into the night, creaking and groaning like an old man turning over in his sleep. Tomorrow will bring more uncertainty, more waiting, more trying to read the future in rumours and fragments, more wondering what happens next. The army will keep retreating, the government will keep advancing, and somewhere between those two forces ordinary people will keep trying to survive. But tonight you think about Agnes's words. I'm glad we met. I'm glad you're here. In a city waiting to see which flag will fly over it, those words feel like something solid, something to hold on to, something that might survive whatever comes next. Outside, snow is falling again, soft and steady. covering the city in white, hiding the filth and the chaos beneath a blanket of cold beauty. You close your eyes. Sleep comes easier than you expected, and somewhere in your dreams you hear pipes playing, that strange wailing music, fading slowly into silence. The new year comes with no celebration. Hogmanay passes quietly. A few people light bonfires in the grass market like they always do, but the fires are smaller this year. The singing is muted. Nobody knows what the new year will bring, and that uncertainty hangs over everything like smoke. 1746. You stand at the window on New Year's morning and watch the city wake up. The castle squats on its ancient rock, that great plug of stone that has held fortresses for 1,000 years. The Union flag snaps in the wind. Down below, in the closes and winds, people are stirring, carrying water, emptying chamber pots, starting the fires that will keep them alive for another day. Everything looks the same as it did yesterday, but something has shifted. You can feel it. The army is coming back, not in triumph, not with London conquered and the Stuarts restored. They're coming back because they failed, because the dream died at Derby and everything since has been retreat and defeat. The first refugees arrive in mid-January. They come straggling up the high street from the Cannon Gate. Not soldiers, families, women with children clinging to their skirts, the little ones too tired to cry, their eyes huge and dark in their pinched faces. Old men carrying bundles of possessions on their backs, everything they own wrapped in blankets or sheets. Young mothers with babies held tight against their chests, trying to shield them from the cold. Their faces are hollow with exhaustion. Their clothes are torn and filthy, caked with mud from roads that turn to rivers in the winter rains. Some are barefoot, their shoes worn through or lost somewhere along the way. Frostbite has turned their fingers and toes black. They've been walking for days, weeks maybe, fleeing ahead of the government forces that are pursuing the retreating army, fleeing the retribution that follows defeat. They tell stories in broken voices. Villages burned, the thatched roofs set alight while families fled into the hills. Livestock slaughtered in the fields, left to rot because there was no one to butcher them. Anyone suspected of Jacobite sympathies dragged away for questioning. Men taken from their beds in the night and never seen again. The reprisals have begun, and they're worse than anyone imagined. You watch them pass from the doorway of the shop. Mr. Crawford watches too, his face grim. A woman stumbles on the cobblestones, and the bundle on her back spills open. A few pieces of clothing, a cooking pot, a doll made of rags, its button eyes staring at the grey sky. She gathers it all up with shaking hands while people flow around her, too caught up in their own survival to help. Where will they go, you ask? Mr. Crawford shrugs. Wherever they can. They have family here, some of them. Cousins, second cousins. People they haven't seen in years but who might take them in because blood is blood. Others will find corners to sleep in, cellars that aren't quite flooded, closes that aren't quite full. The closes are already crowded. They'll be more crowded soon. A child walks past. A boy, maybe 7 or 8. He's alone. No parents in sight. His eyes are blank in that way you've seen before. The way Duncan's eyes were blank when the fever nearly took him. The look of someone who's seen too much. You wonder where his parents are. You don't ask. You're not sure you want to know. That night you see Agnes on the landing. Her face is drawn, worried. My mistress is packing, she says. Not all of it. Just the valuable things. the thing she doesn't want the soldiers to find. Where is she going? She's not going anywhere. Not yet. But she wants to be ready. You stand there in the dark, listening to the building around you. More footsteps than usual. More voices. The refugees are finding places to stay. Relatives taking in relatives. Strangers paying what little they have for a corner to sleep in. "Jamie," Agnes says quietly. "Yeah? If things get bad. Really bad. I might have to leave quickly. I might not be able to say goodbye." You feel something cold settle in your chest. Not surprise. You've known this was coming. But hearing it out loud makes it real. "I know. I don't want to go without seeing you. But if I have to, I understand." She reaches out and takes your hand. Her fingers are cold. They're always cold these days. Everyone's are. You hold on to her for a long moment. Then footsteps on the stairs above, and you both let go. Separate. Become strangers again, in case whoever's coming is watching. February brings news of fighting. The army is still intact, still retreating northward through a country that grows more hostile every day. They won a battle at Falkirk, someone says. A victory finally after months of defeat. The government troops broke and ran just like at Prestonpans. Maybe things are turning around, but even victories don't change the larger picture. The government has more men, more guns, more money, more time. They can afford to lose battles. The Jacobites can't. Every casualty is a loss they can't replace. Every week of fighting drains supplies they can't replenish. You hear the news and try to feel hope. But hope is hard these days. Hope takes energy, and energy is for survival. The skeleton force that held Edinburgh during the winter is gone now, retreated with the rest, heading north to join what remains of the Highland Army. The castle garrison has started venturing out, reclaiming the streets they lost in September. Redcoats everywhere again. Patrols marching up and down the high street. Checkpoints at the ends of the major closes. Officers questioning anyone who looks suspicious. The old order reasserting itself. The old power returning. Most people keep their heads down. Whatever sympathies they had, whatever white cockades they wore, those are gone now. Hidden in drawers, buried in gardens, burned in fireplaces along with letters and documents that might prove dangerous if found. Nobody wants to be found on the losing side. You see people you recognise on the street. People who cheered when the prince rode through the city. People who drank toasts to King James in taverns and sang the old songs with tears in their eyes. Now they walk past the red-coated soldiers without making eye contact. They answer questions with mumbles and shrugs. They've forgotten everything. They were never Jacobites. They never supported the cause. Survival is more important than loyalty. Always has been. Mr. Crawford reopens properly in March. The advocates are coming back, emerging from wherever they hid during the occupation. The judges are returning. The courts will sit again soon. Men who spent months pretending not to exist are emerging, dusting off their wigs, smoothing their coats, pretending nothing happened. Business picks up. Orders come in. There's something almost obscene about it. While an army is dying somewhere in the north, while men are fleeing through the hills with government cavalry hunting them down, you're shaping horsehair into curls for lawyers who'll sit in judgment on the survivors. But you do it anyway. You don't have a choice. The choice was made for you long ago, when you were born a third son to a tenant farmer with no land to spare. Your choices are work or starve. Everything else is luxury. Duncan works beside you now. He's mostly recovered, though he still coughs sometimes, especially in the damp weather. His fingers are slower than they used to be. His eyes tire quickly. But he's alive, which is more than many can say. William reads his Bible every night, the same passages, over and over. You've asked him what he's looking for. He just shakes his head. Maybe he doesn't know either. The spring rains come, cold and relentless. The closes become rivers of mud and worse. The stench, dampened by the winter cold, rises again as the temperatures climb. Everything smells like rot and waste, and too many people crammed into too small a space. You breathe through your mouth, same as always. And then, in April, the end comes. You don't know it's the end at first. Just another rumour among hundreds. A battle somewhere in the north. A place called Culloden. Near Inverness, someone says. Though you don't know exactly where that is. Somewhere in the Highlands. Somewhere cold and wet and far from everything. But this rumour is different. This one doesn't change as it passes from mouth to mouth. The details stay the same no matter who's telling them. The army destroyed, the clans broken, thousands dead in less than an hour. Less than an hour. All those men, all those months of fighting, all that hope and fear and blood, ended in less time than it takes to eat breakfast. The prince is fleeing, running for his life, heading for the coast, for a ship, for France. The same France that promised to send help and never did. The same France that let him march to Derby and turn back with nothing. He's going back there now because there's nowhere else to go. It's over. For real this time. No more rallying. No more hoping. No more believing that something might change. The news reaches Edinburgh on a grey morning in late April. Official this time. Proclamations read in the market squares by men in government uniforms. Church bells ringing, not in mourning but in celebration. Bonfires lit in the grass market. The government celebrating its victory. You're in the shop when you hear the bells. Mr. Crawford pauses in his work, listens, then goes back to what he was doing. His face shows nothing. He's been in this city for 40 years. He's seen rebellions come and go. He knows better than to show what he's feeling. You think about Malcolm. You've been thinking about him a lot lately, wondering if he was at Culloden, if he stood in the Highland charge that everyone's talking about, if he ran toward the government guns with his claymore raised, screaming in Gaelic, believing that courage could overcome artillery, if he's one of the thousands lying dead in some northern field, his body left to rot because there's no one to bury him, if he's running, like the prince, trying to escape before the government catches up with him, if he's been captured, if he's in chains somewhere, waiting for a trial that will end with a rope, you'll probably never know. Men disappear in wars. They walk into battles and never walk out, and nobody sends word to the people who knew them. They just become gaps, empty spaces where people used to be, names that stop being spoken until eventually nobody remembers them at all. Like Malcolm's pallet, still empty, still waiting for someone who's probably never coming back. That evening, you find Agnes on the landing. She's been crying. Her eyes are red. Her hands shake slightly. She looks smaller somehow. Older. Like the news has aged her in a single day. It's over, she says. I know. My mistress is leaving. Tomorrow morning. She has a cousin in Stirling who'll take her in. A distant enough connection that maybe no one will think to look for her there. Distant enough that the letters from France might not follow. What about you? Agnes takes a deep breath, lets it out slowly. She's taking me with her, says she needs a servant she can trust, Someone who won't talk about what she's seen or heard. Says I'll be safer there than here. You feel the floor tilt slightly beneath your feet. You knew this was coming. You've known for months. Ever since she mentioned that cousin in Glasgow. Ever since she started talking about what happens if things get bad. But knowing something and feeling it happen are different things. When do you leave? Dawn. Before the patrols are properly out. Before anyone's asking questions about who's going where and why. You stand there in the half dark. The building creaks around you. Someone's baby is crying 3 floors up. That thin, exhausted wail that means hunger or sickness or both. A man's voice is raised in anger somewhere below. The sounds of life going on, oblivious to the ending that's happening right here, on this landing, between 2 people who found each other in the middle of chaos. The light from somewhere below catches Agnes's face, her cheekbones sharp under the skin, her eyes dark and deep. She's beautiful. She's always been beautiful. You just never had the words to say it. I don't want to go, Agnes says. I know, but I have to. You understand that, right? If I stay, if they find out about my mistress's letters, about her brother in France, about the money she sent to support the cause. She doesn't finish. She doesn't have to. I understand. You do. That's the worst part. You understand completely. Survival isn't about what you want. It's about what you have to do. It's about making choices that hurt because the alternative is worse. Agnes steps closer, close enough that you can see the tears on her cheeks, the way they catch the faint light, close enough that you can smell the lavender she uses in her mistress's linens, close enough that if you reached out you could touch her, hold her, pretend for a moment that nothing is ending. I'll come back, she says, when things settle, when it's safe. I'll come back to Edinburgh and I'll find you. I'll look for the wig maker's shop on the high street, and I'll ask for the apprentice named Jamie, and I'll find you. You want to believe her. You try to believe her. You tell yourself that people make promises like this and keep them, that the world isn't always cruel, that sometimes, against all odds, things work out. I'll be here. Promise? I promise. And then she's kissing you. It's quick, barely a moment. Her lips cold and tasting of salt from her tears. Her hand on your cheek just for a second, the touch so light it might be imagined. Then she pulls back, wipes her eyes with her sleeve, tries to smile and almost manages it. Goodbye, Jamie. Goodbye, Agnes. She goes down the stairs. You watch her until she disappears into the darkness of the lower landing. You listen to her footsteps fade, one step at a time, each one carrying her further away. And then there's nothing but silence, and the creaking of the old building settling into the night. You climb up to your room. Duncan is asleep. William is reading his Bible, same as always. The candle flickers. The shadows dance on the walls. You lie down on your pallet. Pull the thin blanket over yourself. Stare at the ceiling with its smoke stains and cracks. Somewhere out there, an army is being hunted. Men who fought for a cause they believed in are running for their lives or lying dead in fields they'll never leave. A prince is fleeing toward the sea, his dreams of glory dissolved into fear and exhaustion. And somewhere out there, a servant girl with dark eyes is packing a few possessions for a journey to Stirling. You think about promises, about what they mean, about whether a promise made on a tenement landing in a city that's been through hell can survive what comes next. You don't know the answer, But you hold on to the promise anyway, because it's all you have. Outside, the rain continues to fall, soft and steady, washing the blood and the chaos down the gutters and into the streets where it will flow toward the sea. Edinburgh sleeps, or pretends to sleep, a city that has seen too much, that has been occupied and fought over and used as a pawn in a game played by kings and princes. And in the morning, when the sun rises over the rooftops and the castle's shadow stretches across the old town, Agnes will be gone. But you'll still be here, still making wigs, still surviving. That's what people like you do. The candle burns down to nothing. The room goes dark. You close your eyes. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. And in your dreams, you see a landing on the 3rd floor. A girl with dark eyes. A promise that might mean something, or might not. Time will tell. The prisoners come in May. You see them from the shop window. A long column of men shuffling up the high street, their hands bound with rough rope that's cut into their wrists, their clothes torn and filthy from weeks of marching. Government soldiers walk on either side, muskets ready, bayonets fixed. Their red coats are bright against the grey Edinburgh stone. They look well fed, rested, victorious. Everything the prisoners are not. These are the survivors. The ones who didn't die at Culloden, cut down by artillery or bayoneted where they fell. The ones who were captured in the weeks that followed, hunted through the glens and mountains like animals, tracked by dogs, betrayed by neighbours, starved out of hiding places in caves and bothies. They don't look like an army anymore. They look like ghosts. Some of them can barely walk. They lean on each other, stumbling over the cobblestones that you've walked 1,000 times. Their bare feet leave bloody prints on the stone, toes blackened by frostbite, ankles swollen and raw. One man falls, and a soldier kicks him until he gets back up. The column keeps moving. Nobody stops. Their eyes are empty. The look of men who've already died in every way that matters. They've seen friends cut down beside them. They've been beaten and starved and marched for weeks. They know what's waiting for them at the end of this journey. Trial, execution, or worse, transportation to the colonies, to work as slaves on sugar plantations until the heat and the labour kill them. Some of the prisoners are young, younger than you. Boys who picked up swords because their fathers told them to, because the clan chief called, because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Now they're shuffling toward their deaths with the same blank expressions as the old men beside them. People gather on the street to watch. Some jeer, some throw things. Rotten vegetables, horse dung, stones that draw blood, words that cut worse than either, traitors, rebels, Highland savages. These are the people who kept their heads down during the occupation, the ones who hid their sympathies and waited to see which side would win. Now they're making sure everyone knows where they stand. Now they're loyal subjects of King George. Always have been, always will be. But not everyone jeers. Some watch in silence. Some weep openly, not caring who sees. An old woman falls to her knees and prays aloud, her voice rising above the noise of the crowd. Nobody stops her. Maybe they're afraid to. Maybe they're praying too in their hearts. You watch until the last prisoner passes. A boy, maybe 14. His face is bruised. One eye is swollen shut. He's limping badly, dragging his left leg, and you wonder how much longer he can keep going before he falls and doesn't get up. Then he's gone, around the corner toward the Tolbooth prison, and you go back to your work. What else can you do? The trials begin in June. They're held in the old courthouse just off the high street, the same building where advocates argued cases about inheritance and debt before the world turned upside down. Now it's full of something else. Men in chains, soldiers with weapons, judges in their wigs and robes dispensing the king's justice. The king's revenge, more like. The sentences are harsh. Death for the leaders. The clan chiefs, the officers, anyone whose name was spoken with respect is now spoken as a death warrant. They'll be hanged, drawn and quartered, the old punishment for treason, their bodies cut down before they're fully dead, their bellies opened, their hearts cut out, their heads displayed on spikes as a warning to others. For the common soldiers the sentences are different but no kinder. Transportation, shipped off to the colonies in the holds of ships that are barely fit for cattle, to work as slaves on plantations in Jamaica or Virginia or Maryland, to dig in fields under a sun that will burn their pale highland skin, to work until the heat and the labour and the disease kill them, which usually doesn't take long. Some of the condemned are executed in London. Made into spectacles for English crowds who never saw a Highlander before and never want to see one again. Crowds gather to watch them die, cheer when the axe falls, buy souvenirs from vendors who've set up stalls near the scaffolds. But some are brought back to Edinburgh, back to the grass market where the gallows have stood for centuries, where the Covenanters were martyred decades ago, where crowds have always gathered to watch men die. You try not to watch, but you can hear it from the shop, the drums beating out a slow rhythm, the roar of the crowd hungry for spectacle, the voice of the minister reading out the condemned man's crimes, the sudden silence that means the trapdoor has dropped and another man is dancing on the end of a rope. They leave the bodies hanging, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, as a warning. As a reminder of what happens to rebels, Mr. Crawford works through it all. His hands never falter, his face never changes. He shapes the horsehair, he mixes the powder, he does what he's always done, as if nothing is happening outside these walls. You try to be like him. You try to keep your hands steady and your face blank. But sometimes, when the drums start, you have to step away from your bench and breathe. You go to the back room. You stare at the wall. You wait for your hands to stop shaking. Summer comes. The days grow long. The sun sets late, lingering on the horizon like it's reluctant to leave. And still the executions continue, week after week, body after body, until you stop counting, until it becomes just another part of life in Edinburgh. Background noise, something you try not to think about. One morning in early July, a caddie comes to the shop, the same caddie who warned you about the ships a year ago. He looks older now, thinner. The past year has aged everyone. He asks to speak with you privately. Mr. Crawford nods and waves you toward the back room. What is it? The caddie looks around, making sure you're alone. Your friend, he says, the one who left, the apprentice, Malcolm. I asked around, called in some favours. Took a while, but I found out what happened. Your stomach tightens. You've been waiting for this, dreading it. He was at Culloden, the caddie says, in the front ranks, one of the first to charge. Is he dead? The caddie shakes his head slowly. Worse. They took him prisoner, tried him in Inverness, hanged him last month. You don't say anything. You can't. The words won't come. The caddie reaches out and puts a hand on your shoulder, just for a moment. I'm sorry, lad. He seemed like a good one. They were all good ones, most of them. just caught up in something bigger than themselves. Then he's gone, back to the streets, back to the business of knowing everything and everyone. You stand in the back room for a long time. The sounds of the city drift in through the window, carts rattling, people shouting. Life going on, the way it always does, no matter who's dying or dead. Malcolm, the one who sang the old songs in the tavern, the one who talked about his uncle's missing fingers, the one who left in the middle of the night, heading for the Highlands with a bundle on his shoulder and hope in his heart. Dead now, executed. His body probably left to rot on a gibbet somewhere. A warning to anyone else who might think about rebellion. You go back to work. What else is there to do? The laws come down like hammer blows. No more tartans, no more kilts, no more plaids. The old Highland dress worn by generations is now illegal. Anyone caught wearing it faces imprisonment. 6 months for the first offence, 7 years transportation for the second. It's not just about clothes, it's about identity. The tartan patterns meant something. Each one belonged to a clan, to a family, to a place. Wearing your tartan was like wearing your history. Now that history is illegal. The bagpipes are banned too. Those strange, wailing instruments that you heard when the army first came to Edinburgh. The music that sounded like grief and defiance mixed together. They're considered instruments of war now. Weapons, almost. Anyone caught playing them can be prosecuted as a rebel. The songs are banned. The old Gaelic songs that Malcolm used to sing in the tavern, his voice low and careful, songs about heroes and battles and a homeland that was being erased. You can still hear them sometimes, late at night, in places where people think they won't be overheard. But even then, the singers are afraid. Even then, they watch the door. The clan chiefs lose their power, their ancient right to dispense justice on their lands, their authority over the men who served them. The bonds of loyalty that held Highland society together for centuries are being cut, one by one. The government calls it pacification, civilization, bringing the Highlands into the modern world. But it doesn't look like civilization. It looks like destruction. You hear stories from the north. Terrible stories. Villages burned, every house put to the torch while families flee into the hills with nothing but the clothes on their backs, cattle seized, sheep slaughtered, the livestock that people depended on for survival, killed and left to rot because there's no one to use them. People driven from land their families have worked for centuries, cleared off like vermin, sent to the coast, to the cities, to anywhere that's not home. Some try to stay. They hide in caves. They live off whatever they can find. Most of them die, of cold, of hunger, of the soldiers who hunt them down and show no mercy. It's not just punishment, it's annihilation. The government isn't just defeating the rebellion. It's trying to make sure there can never be another one, and the only way to do that is to destroy the culture that produced it. The old way of life is dying. The world that Malcolm believed in, that he fought for, that he died for, it's being erased. In a generation, maybe 2, there won't be anyone left who remembers what it was like. The tartans will be forgotten, the songs will be silent, the Highlands will be empty, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The weeks blur into months. You work, you eat, you sleep, you wake up and do it again. Duncan is getting stronger. His cough is almost gone now. He works beside you at the bench, his fingers steadier than they've been since he got sick. Sometimes you catch him staring out the window, watching the street below, and you wonder what he's thinking. But you don't ask. Everyone has their own ghost now. William finishes his Bible, cover to cover, then he starts again from the beginning. He's looking for something, you realise, answers to questions he won't speak out loud. You hope he finds them. Mr. Crawford says nothing about the occupation, nothing about the trials or the executions or the laws that are reshaping the country. He comes to work, he makes wigs, he goes home. Whatever he's feeling, he keeps it locked away where no one can see it. That's how you survive in Edinburgh. You keep your head down, you do your work, you don't talk about things that might get you in trouble. August passes, then September. A year since the Highlanders first marched into the city. A year since you saw the prince on his grey horse, riding up the cannon gate with the confidence of a man who believed he was destined to be king. It feels like a lifetime ago. You still think about Agnes, at night mostly. When the building is quiet and the only sounds are Duncan's breathing and the creak of old timber, you lie on your pallet and remember her face, her voice, the cold touch of her lips on that last night. She said she'd come back. She said she'd find you. But months have passed, and there's been no word, no message, no sign that she's still alive. Maybe she can't get word to you. Maybe it's too dangerous. Maybe she's trying to protect herself, or you, or both. Or maybe the promise was just words, something to make the goodbye easier, something to hold on to in the moment, even if it meant nothing in the long run. You don't know, and not knowing is the worst part. The autumn rains come, the closes turn to rivers of mud again, the cold creeps back into the city, into the stones, into your bones. Another winter in Edinburgh. Another season of darkness and cold and trying to stay alive. You're 17 now, still an apprentice, still years away from being a journeyman, from having any say in your own life. But you're different than you were a year ago. You've seen things, lived through things, learned things about the world and about yourself that you never wanted to learn. You've learned that causes don't always win, even when they're passionate. That belief doesn't stop bullets. That promises made in the dark don't always survive the light. You've learned that survival is its own kind of victory. That waking up each morning, putting one foot in front of the other, doing the work that needs to be done, that's not nothing. That's not giving up. That's just life, going on the way it always has, no matter what kings and princes do. One evening in late November, you find yourself on the third floor landing. You're not sure why you came here. You were on your way up from fetching water, and your feet just stopped. This is where you used to meet Agnes. This is where you talked in whispers, where she kissed you goodbye. The landing is empty now. The door to her mistress's apartment is closed. New tenants, someone said, a merchant's family from Glasgow. They don't know anything about the woman who lived here before. They don't want to know. You stand there for a long moment. The building creaks around you. The same sounds you've heard 1,000 times. Voices and footsteps and the endless noise of too many people living too close together. But Agnes's voice isn't among them. Her footsteps are gone. You think about the promise you made. I'll be here. You are here. You've kept your half of it. Maybe someday she'll keep hers, or maybe she won't. Maybe she's already forgotten you. Maybe she started a new life in Stirling, with new people, new routines, new reasons to keep going. You wouldn't blame her. That's what survival looks like sometimes. Letting go of the past so you can keep moving forward. You take a deep breath, let it out slowly. Then you pick up your water bucket and keep climbing, one foot after another. One day after another, that's all any of us can do. The first snow of winter falls on the last day of November. You watch it from the shop window, soft white flakes drifting down past the stone facades of the buildings across the street, covering the filth and the chaos beneath a blanket of cold beauty. The city looks peaceful, almost innocent. Like nothing bad ever happened here, like the blood and the suffering and the death were just a dream you had once. But you know better. You turn back to your work, a wig for a judge, one of the men who's been sentencing Jacobite prisoners to death all summer. His wig needs new curls, fresh powder. He wants to look respectable when he sends the next batch to the gallows. You make his wig anyway. You shape the horsehair. You mix the powder. You do the work that keeps you fed and housed and alive. That's the deal. That's the bargain you've made with the world. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, you keep working. And somewhere, in the space between memory and hope, you hold on to the thought of a girl with dark eyes who might someday find her way back to Edinburgh. It's not much,